Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report for Saturday, January 27th, 2018, the 8th year of Cheongi, 12th month, and the 11th day on the heavenly calendar. And Tim Elder and Ted O'Grady in this morning for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Moon. Let's start with our weather. Actually, before that, let's before we even do the weather, let's start with President Trump's speech at the Davos conference yesterday. We tried to bring that live yesterday, but it was about an hour off of our schedule. He started at 8 a.m. Pennsylvania time instead of 7 a.m. as I had originally expected, and so we weren't able to see that. Can the tech team go ahead and start that YouTube video with the president?
Thank you, Klaus, very much. It's a privilege to be here at this forum where leaders in business,
can we have a little more volume, please?
Diplomacy, and world affairs have gathered for many, many years to discuss how we can advance prosperity, security, and peace. I'm here today to represent the interests of the American people and to affirm America's friendship and partnership in building a better world. Like all nations represented at this great forum, America hopes for a future in which everyone can prosper and every child can grow up free from violence, poverty, and fear. Over the past year, we have made extraordinary strides in the U.S. We're lifting up forgotten communities, creating exciting new opportunities, and helping every American find their path to the American dream, the dream of a great job, a safe home, and a better life for their children. After years of stagnation, the United States is once again experiencing strong economic growth. The stock market is smashing one record after another and has added more than $7 trillion in new wealth since my election. Consumer confidence, business confidence, and manufacturing confidence are the highest they have been in many decades. Since my election, we've created 2.4 million jobs, and that number is going up very, very substantially. Small business optimism is at an all-time high. New unemployment claims are near the lowest we've seen in almost half a century. African American unemployment has reached the lowest rate ever recorded in the United States, and so has unemployment among Hispanic Americans. The world is witnessing the resurgence of a strong and prosperous America. I'm here to deliver a simple message. There has never been a better time to hire, to build, to invest, and to grow in the United States. America is open for business, and we are competitive once again. The American economy is by far the largest in the world, and we've just enacted the most significant tax cuts and reform in American history. We've massively cut taxes for the middle class and small businesses to let working families keep more of their hard-earned money. We lowered our corporate tax rate from 35% all the way down to 21%. As a result, millions of workers have received tax cut bonuses from their employers in amounts as large as $3,000. The tax cut bill is expected to raise the average American's household income by more than $4,000. The world's largest company, Apple, announced it plans to bring $245 billion in overseas profits home to America. Their total investment into the United States economy will be more than $350 billion over the next 5 years. Now is the perfect time to bring your business, your jobs, and your investments to the United States. This is especially true because we have undertaken the most extensive regulatory reduction ever conceived. Regulation is stealth taxation. The U.S., like many other countries, unelected bureaucrats, and we have, believe me, we have them all over the place, and they've imposed crushing and anti-business and anti-worker regulations on our citizens with no vote, no legislative debate, and no real accountability. In America, those days are over. I pledged to eliminate 2 unnecessary regulations for every 1 new regulation. We have succeeded beyond our highest expectations. Instead of 2 for 1, we have cut 22 burdensome regulations for every 1 new rule. We are freeing our businesses and workers so they can thrive and flourish as never before. We are creating an environment that attracts capital, invites investment, and rewards production. America is the place to do business. So come to America, where you can innovate, create, and build. I believe in America. As President of the United States, I will always put America first, just like the leaders of other countries should put their country first also. But America first does not mean America alone. When the United States grows, so does the world. American prosperity has created countless jobs all around the globe, and the drive for excellence, creativity, and innovation in the U.S. has led to important discoveries that help people everywhere live more prosperous and far healthier lives. As the United States pursues domestic reforms to unleash jobs and growth, we are also working to reform the international trading system so that it promotes broadly shared prosperity and rewards to those who play by the rules. We cannot have free and open trade if some countries exploit the system at the expense of others. We support free trade, but it needs to be fair and it needs to be reciprocal, because in the end, unfair trade undermines us all. The United States will no longer turn a blind eye to unfair economic practices, including massive intellectual property theft, industrial subsidies, and pervasive state-led economic planning. These and other predatory behaviors are distorting the global markets and harming businesses and workers, not just in the U.S., but around the globe. Just like we expect the leaders of other countries to protect their interests, as President of the United States, I will always protect the interests of our country, our companies, and our workers. We will enforce our trade laws and restore integrity to our trading system. Only by insisting on fair and reciprocal trade can we create a system that works not just for the U.S., but for all nations. As I have said, the United States is prepared to negotiate mutually beneficial bilateral trade agreements with all countries. This will include the countries in TPP, which are very important. We have agreements with several of them already. We would consider negotiating with the rest, either individually or perhaps as a group, if it is in the interests of all. My administration is also taking swift action in other ways to restore American confidence and independence. We are lifting self-imposed restrictions on energy production to provide affordable power to our citizens and businesses and to promote energy security for our friends all around the world. No country should be held hostage to a single provider of energy. America is roaring back, and now is the time to invest in the future of America. We have dramatically cut taxes to make America competitive. We are eliminating burdensome regulations at a record pace. We are reforming the bureaucracy to make it lean, responsive, and accountable, and we are ensuring our laws are enforced fairly. We have the best colleges and universities in the world, and we have the best workers in the world. Energy is abundant and affordable. There has never been a better time to do business in America. We are also making historic investments in the American military because we cannot have prosperity without security. To make the world safer from rogue regimes, terrorism, and revisionist powers, we are asking our friends and allies to invest in their own defenses and to meet their financial obligations. Our common security requires everyone to contribute their fair share. My administration is proud to have led historic efforts at the United Nations Security Council and all around the world to unite all civilized nations in our campaign of maximum pressure to denuke the Korean Peninsula. We continue to call on partners to confront Iran's support for terrorists and block Iran's path to a nuclear weapon. We're also working with allies and partners to destroy jihadist terrorist organizations such as ISIS, and very successfully so. The United States is leading a very broad coalition to deny terrorists control of their territory and populations, to cut off their funding, and to discredit their wicked ideology. I am pleased to report that the coalition to defeat ISIS has retaken almost 100% of the territory once held by these killers in Iraq and Syria. There is still more fighting and work to be done and to consolidate our gains. We are committed to ensuring that Afghanistan never again becomes a safe haven for terrorists who want to commit mass murder to our civilian populations. I want to thank those nations represented here today that have joined in these crucial efforts. You are not just securing your own citizens, but saving lives and restoring hope for millions and millions of people. When it comes to terrorism, we will do whatever is necessary to protect our nation. We will defend our citizens and our borders. We are also securing our immigration system as a matter of both national and economic security. America is a cutting-edge economy, but our immigration system is stuck in the past. We must replace our current system of extended family chain migration with a merit-based system of admissions that selects new arrivals based on their ability to contribute to our economy, to support themselves financially, and to strengthen our country. In rebuilding America, we are also fully committed to developing our workforce. We are lifting people from dependence to independence because we know the single best anti-poverty program is a very simple and very beautiful paycheck. To be successful, it is not enough to invest in our economy. We must invest in our people. When people are forgotten, the world becomes fractured. Only by hearing and responding to the voices of the forgotten can we create a bright future that is truly shared by all. The nation's greatness is more than the sum of its production. A nation's greatness is the sum of its citizens, the values, pride, love, devotion, and character of the people who call that nation home. From my first international G7 summit to the G20, to the UN General Assembly, to APEC, to the World Trade Organization, and today at the World Economic Forum, my administration has not only been present, but has driven our message that we are all stronger when free, sovereign nations cooperate toward shared goals, and they cooperate toward shared dreams. Represented in this room are some of the remarkable citizens from all over the world. You are national leaders, business titans, industry giants, and many of the brightest minds in many fields. Each of you has the power to change hearts, transform lives, and shape your country's destinies. With this power comes an obligation, however, a duty of loyalty to the people, workers, and customers who have made you who you are. So together, let us resolve to use our power, our resources, and our voices, not just for ourselves, but for our people, to lift their burdens, to raise their hopes, and to empower their dreams, to protect their families, their communities, their histories, and their futures. That's what we're doing in America, and the results are totally unmistakable. It's why new businesses and investment are flooding in. It's why our unemployment rate is the lowest it's been in so many decades. It's why America's future has never been brighter. Today, I am inviting all of you to become part of this incredible future we are building together. Thank you to our hosts. Thank you to the leaders and innovators in the audience. But most importantly, thank you to all of the hardworking men and women who do their duty each and every day, making this a better world for everyone. Together, let us send our love and our gratitude to make them, because they really make our countries run. They make our countries great. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Rio, we can turn that off now. Just to give some reactions from the audience that were reported by Reuters. Those in the audience mostly noted the upbeat tone of his speech. I think he came here to make not just American but global business comfortable about where America is now, said IHS Markit's chief economist Nariman Baravesh. He wasn't trying to convert people to his own views, but saying we are a great economy, come and invest in the U.S. Andrei Guriev, chief executive of Russian fertilizer giant Fosagro, said Trump had spoken, quote, how big business people should be speaking at important road shows of their own companies, unquote. That did not please everyone. Winnie Byanima, director of Oxfam International, said Trump's boastful sales pitch was a victory lap for the trillions of tax cuts that the wealthy elites and corporations have clamored for. Still, the reception was more polite than might have been expected, given the open anxiety with which the prospect of a Trump presidency was met at Davos a year ago. Trump's questioning of trade, withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty, and nationalist rhetoric sit uneasily at the quintessentially globalist event. Throughout the week, European leaders spoke with worry about the rise of populism. Without mentioning Trump by name, German Chancellor Angela Merkel evoked the build-up to the two world wars. Trump hosted a dinner with business leaders on Thursday night. Two European executives told Reuters they stayed away because they did not want to shake his hand. One said he consulted his wife and children before deciding not to go. My impression of President Trump's speech just now is that he's talking about I don't want to say new world order because that's phrase has other connotations, but a newer world order, or anyway, a world order that's different from what the elites at Davos are looking for. He's talking about a world order in which America is strong and invites other countries to be strong with America. Mm-hmm. And it is a world order. He spoke a little bit about the foreign policy, about the Korean Peninsula, about Iran, and also about terrorism. So this is a world order in which the countries that are willing to work with America, be strong with America, are going to protect themselves against North Korea and Iran and terrorism. So it is a kind of a world order. It is a kind of a world order in which countries that frankly have are agree with America or agree with American values, let's say, are able to share American values, are united in strength. I think that's the kind of... Next Tuesday, President Trump is going to give his State of the Union address, so I think maybe this speech was kind of a warm-up to that, kind of maybe a first draft even of that speech. I wonder, I'll be interested to see how much of this speech is reflected in the State of the Union speech on Tuesday night that he will give to a joint session of Congress. It'd be interesting to see that. What was your impression, Ted?
I love Trump. Trump's awesome. Trump is King Cyrus reincarnated. So, it's not a question of a new world order, Tim. I would say a sovereign world order. I would say follow the leader because the results are there. He's talking about numbers. He's talking about incredible numbers.
Yes, he is.
And it was interesting to me that Oxfam, of all organizations, peevishly turns up their nose at Trump.
Yeah, well, that's to be expected.
Based in the UK. Well, there you go. Okay, you want to go with your pterodactyl monarchy, continue. But it's the people, Tim, as he mentioned, the people.
Yes.
So really, it's like the Toronto Good Constitution, Tim, like we're doing here, right? Sovereignty, good governance, being under the Judeo-Christian ethic, being responsible, being free, and that results in good governance on the local level on up. So it's actually devolved with Trump, although America on the national level is doing great, but it's also devolving down to the local level, the town level, the county level, and that's how we're going to build Chonoguk.
Oxfam says that it is an international confederation of charitable organizations focused on alleviating global poverty. However, they are a very socialist type of organization, and we know that socialism actually creates poverty, does not alleviate poverty. But they believe that the government's role is to redistribute wealth. But we know that this actually results in everyone becoming poor. Whereas what President Trump is doing is making everybody rich.
Exactly.
Or not rich, but at least well off. He mentioned a few numbers, but we could mention even more. Some time ago we saw that the number of people who are on food stamp recipients has gone down quite a bit during the 1 year that he's been president, and he mentioned the fall in the food stamp recipients down by 2 million under President Trump. USDA figures show. So 2 million fewer people are on food stamps now after 1 year of president. There's still about 40 million, but the trend is good.
It just goes back to the Declaration of Independence, Tim. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Self-evident.
That they are endowed by their Creator, with certain inalienable rights that are among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Of course, that last phrase comes from John Locke in the English, which I don't know why they've become, such globalist pterodactyls with their monarchy, because that philosophical framework comes through.
You're giving dinosaurs a bad name.
Pterodactyls. Maybe they'll come back to life, but see Jurassic Park. Life, liberty, and property was the philosophy of John Locke. So the Declaration, Jefferson replaced it with happiness. So happiness is based on property. It's based on the fact that we're sovereign and the fact that our rights are inalienable. They're given by God. In fact, inalienable means no one can mess with those rights. And that's really, really, really the basis of what Trump is talking about, of sovereignty. It's the basis of the Chonoguk Constitution as well. And that's the challenge that Trump is laying down to these globalists and everyone else, okay? Look, we're doing this in America because we have these values. Who's going to get on board with us?
Yes.
And if one country after another starts getting on board, like Venezuela, for example, as you talked about yesterday, which is totally trashed. Why? Because the Central Powers have hijacked those rights, Same battle we're having here in the USA. So it's incumbent upon each of us, upon all of us as covenant believers, to do our part. And each person that does their part, each individual person that internally does their part and just says, yes, I'll take responsibility. Like our blessing coming up, like you wearing the crown, Tim, like the AR-15. That's the declaration that our rights, that crown was given by God. It was given through Jesus Christ, through our true Father. The AR-15 is given to us that we defend the kingdom, we build the kingdom. It's a declaration to all the pterodactyls of the world that we are sovereign. And so it's so inspiring and hopeful to see that Trump can go there and, his manner. He has such a big impact, but if you notice his way of speaking is very conversational.
Yes.
He doesn't yell at people. He repeats the same themes. He makes friends. He never really goes in and creates enemies. He'll be very strident against the things that are wrong, like fake news. He'll point that out strongly and consistently. But his message is very, very consistent. His action is very, very consistent. And over time, people are starting to believe in him. I mean, Eastern Europe is coming on board now. I mean, your interview yesterday. I saw an interview on with David Knight yesterday with Janet Atkinson, who's the UK MEP at the member of European Parliament.
And actually, I'm going to play that interview later.
Yeah. So, point being that Eastern Europe. Okay, the king's gone to Switzerland.
I think it's the same interview you're talking about.
Eastern Europe now is coming on board with sovereignty. Poland, Hungary, Romania, Czech, Slovakia,
Austria,
Bulgaria, Austria. Austria's got that young prime minister. So this is shifting. Everything's shifting now to God's side.
Yes. President Trump began his speech saying, like all nations represented at this great forum, America hopes for a future which everyone can prosper and every child can grow up free from violence, poverty, and fear. So that opening sentence sort of laid out the goal not only of the Trump administration, but really the goal that he knows that Americans share, the majority of Americans share, that this is what we want. We want a future in which everyone can prosper, not just the elites, but everyone can prosper, that the children can be free from violence, poverty, and fear. Well, free from violence is going to take what? It's going to take police, peace, militia.
Exactly.
And that's the freedom from violence and poverty, freedom from poverty. Freedom from poverty, well, Jesus said the poor will always be with you. So we know that there will always be some poor people because not everyone succeeds.
Right.
But at least to have a society in which everyone can be an entrepreneur and start their business, whether they succeed or fail. And then they are not going to be poor for all of their lives. They're not going to be poor for generations, but because the poor can have the strong families that they can fall back on, the extended family network that they can fall back on, and even communities, community network, local community network that they can call back on, so that there's always a second chance, a third chance, and a fourth chance.
Exactly.
That people can continue to strive, and so that even though poverty will always be there, not people will not be stuck in poverty like they are now, and also free from fear. He says again, the peace police, peace militia, free from fear. There will be sheepdogs who are protecting the community. So that is the ideal that he sets out. And he says over the past year we've made extraordinary strides in the U.S. towards that ideal. And we're lifting up forgotten communities, creating exciting new opportunities, and helping every American find their path to the American dream, the dream of a great job, a safe home, and a better life for their children. And he goes on, yes, and he says I'm creating 2.4 million jobs and the Oxfam calls it a victory lap, but it's a well-deserved victory lap, isn't it? Because Oxfam is, of course, one of the organizations among many that tried so hard to undermine the Trump presidency. And it's kind of sour grapes on their part to say that it's just a victory lap. Yeah, you guys tried your best to make this president fail, but he's not failing. America's not failing. I'm sorry.
No, and there's going to be
what are you going to say?
There's going to be a lot more victory laps.
That's right. There's going to be a lot more victory laps. Yes.
There's going to be an Austrian victory lap and a Polish victory lap and a Czech and a Slovak victory lap. And there's going to be a UK victory lap.
Yes. Now, yesterday, at the end of the program yesterday, I talked about that the Commerce Department was going to announce the first estimate of U.S. GDP growth in the fourth quarter of last year. And I said it was expected to be 3%. Well, it turned out to be 2.6%.
Okay.
Still, this is just the first. This is the first look at it. In other words, these figures get revised twice.
Okay.
Once a month later, and once 2 months later. And the reason they get revised is because a lot of this is it's a big economy.
Yeah.
And so there are estimates that go into this, and not all the data is in there. And so there's always a revision up or down, and we don't know if it's going to go up or down, but there will be revisions announced a month from now and then 2 months from now. But still, it is a fairly good figure, and the stock market went up as a result of that. Just to read the Wall Street Journal article this morning on this, 8 years into what has been an unexpectedly slow expansion, the U.S. economy appears to have picked up steam. So this is the thing, though, so that during the Obama years, there was an expansion, but it was slower, coming than what we've seen in history, because it was coming out of a recession, and you would expect more. But business executives have reported solid quarterly earnings in recent weeks and pointed optimistically to investment and hiring plans for 2018, supported in part by federal tax cuts. Stock prices keep churning higher, and on Friday, the Commerce Department reported that U.S. economy output remained on an above-trend path in the final 3 months of last year. So even though it wasn't 3%, it was still above the trend.
Okay.
Gross domestic product, the value of goods and services produced in the U.S. rose at a 2.6 annual rate in the fourth quarter. The government said that didn't match the second and third quarters above 3% growth, but it exceeded the 2% average that has prevailed since the early 2000s. Output grew 2.5% in 2017 as a whole, the most in 3 years, and the Federal Reserve predicts 2.5% growth in 2018. That puts the economy in unusual territory, not quite booming, but still gaining momentum, deep into an expansion. The growth cycle that began in mid-2009 already ranks as the third longest ever, and is set to become the second longest this spring. Rather than fizzling, the expansion is being spurred on by robust consumer spending and business investment. It isn't near the vigor of the late 1990s, but that was the last time growth clearly accelerated this deep into an expansion. We don't have a lot of history to guide us here. Richard Moody, chief economist of Regions Financial Corp. It is unusual to see what looks to be a strong acceleration this late in the cycle. So the economy is accelerating strongly now. And so this is a part of President Trump's victory lap, that it hasn't, and the Obama people keep saying #thanks Obama. So let me get this straight. Obama held things down, all right?
Okay.
The economy could have done better.
Right.
It never went 3% annual during his presidency, and I don't know what 2017 is going to come out to be, but the first quarter, when there was a transition between Obama and Trump, was less than 2%. So I don't know what 27 is going to be about. But according to the Obama people's logic, all right, he did his best to keep things down, so that his successor could bask in the glory of his economic policy. This is their logic. This is their logic. It's crazy. It's crazy. But what the economists are saying, that this far into an expansion would expect the economy to start to fizzle.
But it's not.
But it's not.
Right.
It's actually accelerating.
Well,
so who are we going to thank?
Well, number one, it's the Trump factor, okay? It's the psychological factor.
Right answer.
Positivity,
yes.
Okay, that's number one.
Yes.
The second thing, though.
Yeah, we have a president who actually loves America.
Loves America, puts America first, and encourages people, is for the people. Also, the manufacturing base, Tim. That's the other thing that's totally different. He called out China in this speech, indirectly.
Indirectly, yes.
Okay, so that's a different type of economic expansion then.
Yes.
It's not just service industries, it's manufacturing, which is innovation, new investment, investment in businesses, not just consumer goods. That's huge. That is huge. And that's an indicator to other Western countries, developed economies, I mean, for Angela Merkel to stand up there and warn the world about build up to pre-World War I and World War II, accusing Trump's nationalism, she should look in the mirror, Tim. She should look in the mirror, and Europe's got to now kind of look in the mirror strongly. And these so-called nationalist parties, I mean, those policies that the Western European leaders are pursuing are creating the groundwork for a resurgent Nazism, for example, in Germany. They're so worried about it, and they should address the problem. Accusing Trump, ridiculous.
Yes.
They're going down, Tim. They're going down soon. The king's been there. We've got Eastern Europe. Poland is very strong. And in the UK is leaving the EU. Brexit is done. It's going to take 2 years apparently, but it's done. It's going to happen.
We're going to do the David Knight interview on that. Teresa maybe or maybe not.
Teresa Pisa.
Yes.
Teresa Pisa, right?
So we're going to do that interview in just a minute. But let's stay on Trump for right now. I like this paragraph. Represented in this room are some of the remarkable citizens from all over the world. You are national leaders, business titans, industry giants, and many of the brightest minds in many fields. Each of you has the power to change hearts, transform lives, and shape your country's destinies. With this power comes an obligation, however. A duty of loyalty to the people, workers and customers who made you who you are.
Right.
Yeah. Who made you who you are.
Yeah.
This is the elites, think that, I was made who I am by my daddy,
Okay,
by my ancestors. They gave me the wealth to go to Princeton or to Harvard or to Yale, wherever. They gave me the money to start my business or to become rich. So I don't owe anything to those peasants.
Yeah. Okay.
Once in a while, you see a story you'll see a story where some nuthead in first class will go back to the rest of the bigger cabin, right, in the back of the airplane, and start calling everybody. They're drunk, all right.
Okay.
They've had too many up there in first class, and they go back and start saying, "Oh, you peasants!" And About once a year, we see a story like that. But they're drunk and they're speaking their mind. They're being honest.
Okay, their true feelings are coming out.
But Trump says, listen, it's those workers, it's the customers who made you who you are. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, the customers, because we buy the products, that's why those people have this power. And so Trump says you have an obligation, or in divine principle terms, we would call it portion of responsibility.
Yes. I don't think they've ever heard the word customer in the Davos group. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
What's that word?
Nah.
You translate, please.
But Thursday, President Trump had a dinner with business leaders, and I think they've heard the word customer.
Okay.
Yeah. Business leaders understand the importance of customer, because once the customer leaves you, you're really in trouble. Yeah. But they need to be reminded, yes, and workers and loyalty to the people. I really like President Trump, that he went there representing that voice. Together, let us resolve to use our power, our resources, and our voices, not just for ourselves, but for our people, to lift their burdens, to raise their hopes, and to empower their dreams, to protect their families, their communities, their histories, and their futures. That's what we're doing in America. In other words, that's not what you guys are doing here in Davos. That's what we're doing here in America. And the results are totally unmistakable. It is why new businesses and investments are flooding in. It's why our unemployment rate is the lowest it has been in so many decades. It's why America's future has never been brighter.
He also said, "God bless you."
Well, yes.
That's another word they've never heard in Davos. Never.
Not supposed to say that in Davos.
God bless you.
Not supposed to say that in Davos.
God exists. Rights come from God.
Yes. All right. Anything else you'd like to say about this?
No.
Okay. Let's take a break, and we'll move on to other news. Thank you, President Trump, for your speech in Davos.
Thank you.
you're just willing to give it a try, and just let the universe and let God guide you from there on. And then it was not after 2 or a couple more trips with each other that we decided that, you know, this could work out, actually.
There was this really clear voice that came to me, like, in that moment, where it was just saying, like, well, Marshall hasn't rejected you, or Marshall sees you for who you are. And I kind of just, like, I kind of had me dumbfounded for a moment. I kind of just sat there, and I'm like, I started getting really choked up, actually, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, and it was like that, in that moment, I, like, realized that everything that I've been praying for in terms of, like, having a man in my life, or, like, everything that I've been praying for God to have in a spouse, like, I realized that all those qualities were in Marshall. And it was a really, really deep realization. And then I'm like, oh my God, everything I was getting frustrated about earlier and all that short temper means nothing anymore, because I realize now, like, it took some sifting through, but I mean, like, I see now that this is really the man that God wants me, and the man that God sent to answer all my prayers. And from there on, I'm like, okay, that's it. Nothing else really matters. I don't care what he does. This I know is from God, and this I know is for real. So I can't turn my back on this now. And that was, for me, the moment that really sealed the deal in my heart. And then shortly after was when Marshall got the phone call.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, January 27th, 2018. I'm Tim Elder with Ted O'Grady, and for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Jin-moon. We're talking about President Trump in Davos. He also gave a interview to CNBC while he was there, and I want to go through a little bit of what he said there. Here the reporter says, so the America First president comes to Davos, and you know, when you say Davos, you know what a lot of people think, globalists, elitists. What will you say when you address not just the globalists and elitists, but everyone? He gave this interview a little bit before he actually got up and spoke. When you address them, what will be your message? Trump says, so when I decided to come to Davos, I didn't think in terms of elitists or globalists. I thought in terms of lots of people that want to invest lots of money, and they're all coming back to the United States. They're coming back to America, and I thought it much more in those terms. After I said I was going there, there were massive stories about the elite and the globalists and the planes flying in and everything else. It's not about that. It's about coming to America, investing your money, creating jobs, companies coming in. We're setting records every week. Every day we're setting records. You see what's going on. Apple now with $350 billion. Most people thought they meant $300 million, which would be a nice plant. But I spoke with Tim Cook, and I was very honored. But you remember in my campaign, I used to say, I won't consider this great unless Apple starts coming in and really investing big money doing the plants. They're going to do a lot. But so many companies are coming in and so many jobs. And then the reporter says, yes, you've moved a little towards the center. But so Macron's saying that globalism doesn't solve problems. Suddenly other countries are saying, we need to take care of, our own country to some extent. This is the reporter. This is the reporter.
To some extent.
So it's almost like the difference between America First and Davos. I think there's plenty of room for you. President Trump says that there's a lot of room, and we love global, but we love home. We have to we have to take care of our home. And the reporter says, right, it's not usually exclusive. President Trump says, now we have the disadvantage of having spent, as of about a month ago, $7 trillion in the Middle East. $7 trillion. That's a big disadvantage. and we're still there. And I've beaten ISIS. We've done a good job, but it's such a shame. It's such a sad, sad thing. Kernan says, let me tell you about the difference of Davos this year. President Trump says, go ahead. We've done 3-hour shows. We have done about 8 guests per hour. So that's like 50 or 60 guests. Right. They are more optimistic this year, and there's global growth, sure. But one thing most are bringing up, and that I want to tell you about, if you didn't see the Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein interview, I just want to tell you what they said about the potential for GDP growth, because the reporters continue to talk here, because those guys might know what they're talking about. But the tax plan has been brought up almost without exception in a positive way by not just the CEOs, but by leaders from other countries even. They need to look at, maybe they need to invest in the United States now because it's a better environment for business. And President Trump said, and that's why I'm here. To a large extent, that's why I'm here. I think that the tax plan has been even better than we thought. What did happen that nobody considered is that AT&T started, but then they immediately followed. Hundreds of companies are giving thousands and thousands of dollars to their workers. And now you have almost 3 million workers that are receiving thousands of dollars. Nobody ever thought. That was not like in the plan. Even Starbucks, says the reporter. Even Starbucks. Trump says, yeah, even Starbucks. Yesterday, Disney and others. I mean, Kernan says, so Diamond said, by the way, Trump interrupts, the ones that aren't doing it, those employees are going like, how about us? Guess what? They're going to be doing it too. Go ahead. And Kernan says, the reporter says, J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon, I know you know him. Not only did he say he thought 3% was possible, he said he could get to 4%. Wow. We could get to 4% in 2018. Lloyd Blankfein and I pressed him a little because I said that was not the outcome, the election that you were, I think, hoping for. Now that you've seen what's happened to the stock market, up 40% since Election Day, how businesses are growing, confidence, are you happy with the outcome? And he said he couldn't really say. I'm happy with the outcome. But he did say, Trump says, no, I don't think, they can't do that. Okay. And Curtis says, but he did, he can't do that. But he did say, but he did say, I don't think the stock market would be where it is. I don't think GDP would be where it is. Maybe the polarization would be less, but he had to concede that the benefits probably outweighed any of the downside.
There you go. The financial guys should just stay out of social philosophy. Yeah. And polarization. What the heck is he talking about? He's talking about some social fantasy. There is no polarization. The polarization is in the mind of the beholder.
Well, there's a polarization between those who, always Hillary's, Hillary no matter what, Hillary right or wrong, Clinton's right or wrong, or the never Trumper not right or wrong. Okay, yeah. These people, they keep saying racist. I haven't heard the word Nazi in a while now. Oh, okay. They don't call us Nazis anymore, do they? Okay. I guess that's kind of an improvement.
It's a German thing.
Yeah. But they were saying, Antifa, for example, was saying that anyone who disagrees with him is a Nazi. Mm. You don't hear about Antifa demonstrations quite so much anymore.
Oh, what's happened to them?
But President Trump goes on to say, I think it'll be much higher than that, than the 4%. So I said, and let's see what happens, because as you know, we're getting a report very soon. We're going to see what that is. I think he's referring to the Commerce Department announcement Friday morning. But I just happened to ask what we were doing, because, if you look at the real numbers, had I not won, had the Democrat won, I'm going to be nice. The Democrat, I say, won. He's not going to say it. I'm going to be nice. I'm going to call her.
Okay. No names.
No names. I would consider their last quarter my first quarter because, I just got there. So let's say the first quarter of 17, you had 1.2 GDP. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, it was less than 2%, way less than 2%. Yeah. Okay. 1.2 in the fourth quarter, which is the Obama quarter. Right. You had a 1.8. Before that, you had 2.8, a 2.2. So, yeah, under Obama, the annual rate never got to 3%. Right. You weren't doing very well, and it was the worst recovery. I guess do they say ever, or since the Great Depression, but it was the worst recovery. Okay, now in my first quarter, Trump is saying, which I consider to be the second quarter because I was there now long enough to have made an impact, and don't kid yourself, regulations are just as big as tax cuts. I've cut more regulations than any president in history, and I've been here for 1 year. You can take their term, whether it's 8 or 16 years in one instance, but you can take anybody you want. In 1 year, we've cut more regulations. And by the way, there's going to be regulation, but they're good, solid, sane regulations. But in quarter 2, we had 3.1. That was the second quarter of 2017. And in quarter 3, as you know, we had 3.2. But in quarter 1, which is the Obama quarter, really the last, I would say, Obama quarter, you had 1.2. We were going in the wrong direction. And Kernan said, right, there was the hurricane. And Trump says, had the Democrat won, still not mentioning names, had the Democrat won, the market is up about 50% since my election. Had the Democrat won, I believe he would have been down 50. Wow. That's the direction we were headed. And you know, a lot of that regulation, it was staggering. You could not do anything. You couldn't build. I approved immediately the 2 pipelines, 48,000 jobs. Kernan says, right, can we talk about the year? Yes, so the year, all these things that you've mentioned, that you've pointed out, but you've been negotiating. Now the government, instead of in the private sector, and has been, I think, lovingly referred to as the swamp by certain, yes, and he says, yes, it's difficult. And have you learned? Are you approaching it differently now? What would you give yourself in terms of negotiating with the government versus business? What grade for the first year? Well, a lot of people have given me an A. He's very modest. Somebody gave me an A plus. So look, I got the biggest tax plan in our history approved, and don't forget, not just a tax plan. Have you learned anything? Well, I got rid of the. Would you do anything different now? Joe, 1 second. I got rid of the individual mandate, the biggest part and the most unpopular thing in the Obamacare, which really repeals Obamacare because it can't live without the mandate, because that's where a lot of the money came. It was unfair to people, and we did ANWR, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. In other words, doing ANWR means allowing oil drilling there, oil exploration there. Ronald Reagan tried to do it 40 years ago. I mean, everybody's been trying to do ANWR, and I got ANWR done as part of the same bill. So on top of the biggest tax cuts, great reform, and the money is coming in. I mean, the money is pouring in. We probably take in $4 trillion from overseas that would never have been able to, that would be here because of regulation. Well, we can talk trade really quickly, but we're doing it. And so we had our solar panels, washing machines. I'm not sure where it goes from here. So yeah, he put tariffs, special tariffs on these cheap imports from China. The solar panels, 30% actually on the imports from China. I'm not sure how China reacts, whether steel's next. So yeah, we'll have to see how China reacts to that. Let's go down here. I like bilateral because if you have a problem, you terminate. When you're with many countries like the TPP, that's the Trans-Pacific Alliance Partnership. So you have 12 if you're in. You don't have that same, you don't have that same option just to terminate. But somebody asked me the other day, would I do TPP? Here's my answer. I'll give you a big story. I would do TPP if we made a much better deal than we had. We had a horrible deal. The deal was a horrible deal. NAFTA is a horrible deal. We're renegotiating it. I may terminate NAFTA. I may not. We'll see what happens. But NAFTA was, and I went around and I'd tell stadiums full of people, I'll terminate it or renegotiate it. So you're opening up the door to. So that was actually one of his bringing up TPP was the headline on many stories because people basically thought that was pretty much dead, although they've been trying to do this without the United States. But President Trump in his speech and in Davos this time opened the possibility that the United States may re-enter the TPP if he says it's in the done in the way that's it's in the interest of the U.S. I'll have to see how that develops. I would do TPP if we were able to make a substantially better deal. The deal was terrible. The way it was structured was terrible. If we did a substantially better deal, I would be open to TPP. So on the one hand, he says that he prefers bilateral because you can, if there's a problem, you can terminate it. He says, hey, forget it, But whereas you have many countries, and it's much more difficult to get out of it once you're in it. So he prefers a bilateral, but he does say open the possibility to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I'm not sure where that came from. That sort of came out of the blue, and many people were surprised to hear that. And he says, "Are you surprised to hear me say that?" I'm a little bit, yeah. I'm a little taken aback. Yeah, a lot of people were surprised. But we have to have a better deal. So we're not really sure how that came about. It's sort of, it was done with, but then suddenly he mentions TPP here at Davos.
It's all about the art of the deal with Trump, Tim.
I guess so.
He throws people off balance. He throws that out there. So now he puts himself in a negotiating position. So it's really instructive. You learn a lot watching Trump.
Yeah. He mentions the $71 billion trade deficit, or $71 billion trade deficit with Mexico, and a trade deficit of Canada of a substantial amount of money. And then, so they said that's why the U.S. is losing in NAFTA. So that's why he wants to either have a better deal or get rid of it. He mentioned Senator Chuck Schumer. He made a mistake in shutting down. He shouldn't have shut down. People in this country want security. They want safety. They want their military to be taken care of. What's going to happen on Monday with DACA? What are you willing to? Are you going to go further? Well, we've already started the process, he said, and actually we'll talk about DACA a little bit later on. Delayed action for childhood arrivals. So, yeah, anyway, that was the, he's going to be talking more about DACA. Yeah, all right. So that's about it. So let's look at some of the other headlines before we break for 6 o'clock. Just a few others. The dozens recount misconduct by mogul. This is the Steve Wynn. He has a lot of hotels in Las Vegas, and gaming officials were aware of it. The stock dives. So Saudi Arabia moves their elites to prison. They were in the Ritz-Carlton until now, or the Ritz Hotel. Yeah, they were in the Ritz Hotel until now.
Saudi Arabia?
In Saudi Arabia, yeah. But now they're going to go to prison because they're still trying to negotiate, trying to get these people to give up their billions. And $100 billion has been wrested by so far. This is the new Crown Prince / acting king. Lachlan Murdoch set for new Fox. FBI dumps Roger Ailes' file. Secretive app promises to aid border crossings. There's an app for that, too.
Secretive app, eh?
Illegal crossing into the United States. There's an app for that. ICE to track license plates across the U.S. That's oh, wow, this is getting pretty scary.
Nice.
There's a video online right now of ICE agents boarding a Greyhound bus and asking everyone for their papers. Well, to show a passport, or either a U.S. passport or a foreign passport with an entry stamp.
This is like common practice in Brazil, right?
But United States,
not in the United States.
In the United States, right now the law says that ICE is able to operate within 100 miles of any border of the U.S., any boundary of the U.S. You know what? That includes us. Yeah, because if you take a straight line from here to the coast of New Jersey, it's a little bit less than 100 miles. But of course, all of Florida would be included in that, right?
Right, of course.
So all of Florida, because all of Florida is less than 100 miles from the coast. So these ICE agents get into a bus and they go down and ask everybody for their passports. And I don't think that's legal.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
I don't think that's legal, actually. I think so. We're going to see what comes of that. It's a video that's gone viral. I
can tell you my little bit of experience with that, living in Brazil for a little while, the psychological effects of that, which Americans aren't aware of. Like in Brazil, where I was a missionary for a number of years, whenever you travel, you have to have documents.
Well, as a foreigner?
No, everyone.
Oh, everyone.
You got to have your documents. I mean, like, documents is, if you lose your document, you lose your personhood. You go on a bus from one town to another, you have to have your document. They're always asking for documents. The bus drivers, everyone's trained to ask for documents. And Yeah, as far as arbitrary power is in the hands of the police, no one has any gun rights. So you basically, I went on one bus ride from Campo Grande to Sao Paulo, which is about 600 miles, and we got stopped three times, and were boarded by heavily armed police that went one by one and asked each person for their documents and got all the luggage out. They were free to look through the luggage. No one said a peep. If you, the point is, if you, in that situation, if you protest, they have arbitrary power to take you.
In Brazil.
Yes,
yeah.
And that's what this is the beginning of that type of mentality.
Yes.
With this type of activity here in the U.S. Okay,
it's very very concerning. Yes, I hope that some kind of consequence comes from that. Let's just do a few more headlines before we break. Tax incentive puts more robots on factory floors. We'll skip the Tom Brady thing. Cryptocurrency exchange
Tom Brady
loses $500 million to hackers. $500 million lost to hackers in the cryptocurrency exchange. USA to seek $716 billion in defense spending. Experts freak over Lake Michigan Clearwater. Update: billionaires targeted. Deaths now ruled double homicide. That was okay. We'll skip his animal stories. Serge Knight's lawyers arrested for attempting to bribe witnesses in murder case.
Finland election there brings new threat to EU. What's that?
Finland election brings new threat to EU.
Finland.
We'll go into that later on. Okay, rise of popular star. Casinos bet on smoothie slots, desperate to lure millennials. Growing number of young children dying from the flu this year.
That's terrible.
Teen girls face conspiracy charges for pineapple juice high fives. Fugitive inmate busted while he was sneaking back into the prison, where he was carrying home-cooked meals and some other good stuff. Maxine Waters giving national address after State of the Union.
Is she? Peach Trump.
Yeah.
Peach Trump. Peach Trump. We don't like him.
Okay, San Jose quake brings Bay Area total to 7 in the last week. Okay, I think that's about
7
it.
earthquakes.
White Democrat accused of hijacking MLK's image in an ad. Worst states to live in. Steve Seagal accuser recounts alleged assault. Asking for phone number could cost men $400 in France. All right. Don't ask anybody for the phone number. All right. So let's take a break now, and we'll be back with more news from a Tony Group perspective after this. And welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, January 27th already. Yes, it's already the 27th of 2018. Already almost a full month has gone by. And Tim Elder and Ted O'Grady, and for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Moon. Let's look at the weather right now. 20 degrees in the Cheongguk area. Going up to, it's clear right now. We have some more clouds as the day goes on, going up to 48 degrees. And so it's going to be another
tropical
spring type, well, not quite 50 degrees, but maybe it'll get 50, who knows. Tonight it's only going to go down to 40 degrees, so no freeze tonight.
Okay.
Overcast and a bit of rain tonight. And then another 48 degrees a day tomorrow. So we're in a little bit of a warmer period right now. Winter is taking another respite. Winter is actually coming back, let's see, Sunday's 48 degrees, then Monday 39, and Tuesday 31, with a nighttime low of 10. So I guess winter comes back on Tuesday, and a little bit of chance of snow showers on Tuesday. All right, let's look at our Rima for today. I'm in Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 11 through, let's go through 13. For they have openly rebelled against me, both the house of Israel and the house of Judah, says the Lord. They denied the Lord, saying, Not he, no evil shall befall us, neither sword nor famine shall we see. The prophets have become wind, and the word is not in them. May their threats be carried out against themselves.
Wow.
Well, so here again, the prophet Jeremiah is giving God's word that God is not happy. No. God is not happy when his people, his chosen people, turn against him. And the people say, "Hey, we're doing fine. We're doing fine." You know, the prophets are all sorts of doom and gloom, but we're not worried. We're not worried.
Yeah, it's a danger of prosperity, isn't it? The king always talks about that, you know?
The danger of prosperity, yes.
We get prosperous and we think, hey, things are great. We don't need God.
That's right.
Forget about
that's
God.
Right. That's right, yes.
Interesting here in the Rima, it's north and south.
Yes,
right?
north and south.
So
yes,
think of North and South Korea, okay? This is a parallel of Israel, right? You got North Korea. I mean, usually the north are the evil kingdoms, right?
Nice.
But, you know, God's not too happy with South Korea these days either.
He's not at all, yeah.
I know, is God happy with us, Tim? I mean,
that is
we're the remnant, right? Isn't that the point?
The remnant, yes. And what I want to emphasize is that this blessing coming up is a tremendous blessing that we receive.
Yeah.
And so if we betray that blessing later on, then we will be worse than the Family Federation.
Yes, so serious stuff.
Yes, very serious stuff. Because this blessing is one that no one has been able to receive. Not since, not even in Adam and Eve. This perfection level blessing was never given by Father to anyone.
No.
Until now.
No.
And so this will be the first time that it is given. So it puts us in a position of greater responsibility. Responsibility.
That's why the king is encouraging us. He's, a lot of members out there. It's a challenge. You need your AR-15.
Yes.
You need your crown. It was the crown first. That was a big challenge. Now the AR-15. So crossing over that line, I haven't quite done it yet. So crossing over that line, it seems to me, you leave behind your excuses. Like there's no more excuse. You're saying, I'm taking sovereignty. I am fully responsible. If I mess this up, it's my responsibility.
Yes.
But I'm claiming it because I want to. All right? So it's not someone telling me what to do. I'm doing it because I want to do it, and I'm taking it.
Yes.
It's like picking up this AR-15. I take it, I pick it up, I'm taking the responsibility with that.
And it is. And, of course, for those who, for many reasons, financial, legal, and otherwise, cannot purchase an AR-15 right now, there are other ways in which they can meet the conditions for this blessing. And those were outlined in last Sunday's worship message. And so I hope that you will go back to that message that is on YouTube and look at that portion.
That was a very clear explanation, I thought.
Thank you.
4 levels. Everyone can get on the ladder with growth stage Holy Wine. And I look at it this way, Tim. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but after hearing your explanation last week, it was quite clear. Everyone, the door is open for
Praise
everyone
God.
to get on the ladder by drinking the holy wine.
Yes.
It's like 4 stages.
Yes.
Just getting on the ladder, man, that's awesome.
Yes.
All humankind, family fed, whoever, get on the ladder, drink the holy wine, you declare, I'm under true Father's authority.
Yes.
Now we work on growth stage, perfection level,
Yes.
formation stage, perfection level, growth stage, perfection level with the AR.
Yes.
So really the blessing, the doors are flung wide open for all humankind to come under true Father's authority through this
Yes.
blessing.
Yes.
Amen. Aju.
Aju. Now let's go to the Rima in the Cheonseongyung. I'm on page 2253, and this is the chapter on the life of the owner of Cheonryuguk, and the chapter on God's kingdom and the true family, and true families. I don't know exactly how that was translated. Oh, in English they say the true family, don't they? Well, see, this is the thing. In Korean, you don't have the,
Right.
So and you don't have plural or singular. So it could be
Okay.
the true family, or it could be true families.
Okay.
So
You have to assume singular or plural? in Korean?
yeah.
Okay.
But you'd have to go through this to read and see what the intention was.
Okay.
But anyway, here on 2253, upper right-hand corner, viewed horizontally, Adam is the eldest son, the second is Jesus, and the perfected Adam is the third son. Vertically speaking, the third son is the third generation. So grandfather's position is the first generation, the father's position is the second generation, and the son is, or grandson, is the third generation. If this is inverted, then the grandson will be in the grandfather's position. It will be grandfather, father, and grandson, the other way around. Thus, you will be able to enter God's kingdom by completing the 4-position foundation, the realm of 3 generations, through me by practicing absolute obedience. Hence, it is restoration through
That's
indemnity.
interesting.
So here, Father is talking about 3-generation kingship.
Yes.
Yes, isn't he?
He's also talking about inverting it,
Yes. So because,
which means flexibility, which means this relationship goes up and down through the 3 generations.
but also it means that Adam cannot say, hey, I'm the first son.
Yeah.
You all got to follow me.
Oh, I get you.
Yeah?
I see. Okay.
You see where I'm going
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
I'm number one. I'm oldest. I've been around the longest.
Okay.
So everybody's got to follow me.
We've kind of seen that, haven't we?
We've seen that. But he says here, though, that so this is in the process of indemnity. He's not the first son anyway. But anyway, you all know what I'm talking about, right? Anyway, but it gets inverted, and he talks about basically he talks about 3 generations. When the family pledge was translated into English, a huge mistake was made. And this mistake was made by, and Reverend Kwok is responsible because he was responsible for the translation.
Really?
And then it was retranslated, and even then, Reverend Yang was responsible for that translation. And the huge mistake that was made was that in number 3, it talks about the 4 great realms of heart, or Simjung,
Yeah.
and then what? 3 great
Three great kingships.
3 great kingships. That's
The realm of the
wrong.
royal family.
That's wrong.
Is it?
3 great kingships is wrong.
Okay.
Because in Korean it's samdae wangkwon, and the word 대 can be expressed in either of 2 Chinese characters.
Okay.
One of those Chinese characters is the character for great,
Okay.
large or great. The other Chinese character, which is also 대, is generation.
I see.
See? So did Father mean 3 great kingships, or did he mean 3 generation kingships? I asked Reverend Yu this, Reverend Yu Jong-ok, and he said clearly that Father's clear message was 3 generation kingships.
Right.
So it was mistranslated.
Wow.
People would say, well, Father never talked about 3 generation kingships. He did. And you'd know it if you'd learned Korean. And here, too, he talks about 3 generation kingships, by the way. But in the family pledge, there's a clear a reference to three-generation kingships. It's just that in the English, it's been translated into three great kingships.
So do we use three-generation kingships? I haven't seen
We use the
three great kingships.
we use the Korean.
Right.
Yes.
우리 가정은 참 사랑으로 중심하고
There you go. Hey.
3대 왕과
3대 왕권과
삼대 왕권과
4대 심정권과 3대 왕권과 황조권을 etc. etc. Yes. So yes, so it's a three generation kingships that Father's talking about. And here he refers to that. The grandfather's position is in the first generation, the father's position, the second generation, and the son or grandson is the third generation. If this is inverted, then the grandson will be in the grandfather's position. So this is then talking then about the third king.
Yes.
It will be grandfather, father, and grandson, and the other way around. Thus you will be able to enter the God's kingdom by completing the four-position foundation, the realm of three generations. So the four-position foundation is the realm of three generations. 1, 2, 3. So you have God's position, or God and parents and the child. But Father says that it's the realm of three generations. He equates that with the four-position foundation, because grandfather's in God's position, and the parents are in the parents and then the children. Hence, it is restoration through indemnity. These words were spoken in 1994.
That's deep content there.
Yes,
Very
yes,
deep.
yes.
Especially in light of where we are
Yes,
in our providence now.
yes. Father's very, a true mother is reading the Cheonsonggyong these days, and when she talks about it, it's as if she's reading it for the first time, although she's not. She's read it many times before. But she's reading it from a completely new perspective, I think, now.
Yeah.
And she just says, it's incredible that anyone could, that a person could actually express these words. She's really deeply moved by the words that. And I think every time we approach the Cheonsonggyong, we can be moved in a new way, because we approach it as we grow spiritually. We approach it, the Cheonsonggyong, and we approach God's word in a different way each time. And so each time it's new to us. It's new to us. If it's not new, it means you're not growing. You're not changing it. We can delve deeper and deeper into it. We can respond to it more and more deeply.
I have one rhema that God gave me this morning.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right, please share it.
I often, things are very personal, Tim, between me and God.
Yeah.
Okay?
Gets that way sometimes, yeah.
So, I had a bit of a showdown prayer conversation with God, today. But God's a big boy, he can take it. So, I got a rhema. And what I find in these situations, Tim, is that, God comes really close and is really real, and he really knows what's going on. So, I got this one. This is Father's Way of God's Will, which I love because it's Father's Short, Father's Words.
That was a book that was originally published in Korea a long time ago. It must have been in the maybe early 70s or late 60s. That book was published in Korean,
But this book, I mean, in the context of going out MFT or witnessing, you pick this up and boom, you get the presence of God right there. So here it is. God loves to hear the confident prayer of a brave man praying in the most lonely and adventurous situation. Aju. So, I asked God, why do you come and kill me and destroy me? Why did you destroy my family? Okay, that's a bit overstating. But I got this one. But then also, I opened a rhema and went right to Solomon's temple and the house of the Lord. Okay, this was God's answer to me. And it was talking about the sacrifices to enter the house of the Lord. 22,000 animals, burnt offerings, sacrificial offerings, okay? So it brought me right to the point, Tim, and that is that the mercy and love of God for the salvation of all humanity, God who willingly sacrificed his beloved Son, his only Son, Jesus Christ. Imagine spending 3 hours being crucified. Imagine the excruciating physical pain of that, the excruciating pain within the heart of God to allow that to happen. And it's the same God with the depth of love apologetically saying, I'm sorry, but I am willing to do this. I'm willing even to sacrifice you, your family, yourself, and burn you up on an altar of offering for the salvation of the lost souls in this world. And that is a deep thing. And coming through that, Tim, I feel so much encouragement and able to give hope to God by being that lonely man, an adventurous man, who then can pray confidently in front of God and say, yes, I'm standing up. Yes, I'm resilient. Yes, I'm here. I'm standing for God. Take my life. Use me. And we will ultimately liberate your heart, God. We will bring Father's kingdom. We will be successful. We will elevate the second and third kingship. And we will establish God's kingdom. And we're willing 1,000 times to go beyond our own lives, even sacrificing the most precious things in our lives for that purpose, in order to liberate our Father's heart. And that's the confident prayer of a brave man in a lonely situation.
Yes. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing that. That's really wonderful. The Way of God's Will, or in Korean, Tukki, is a collection of short quotes from Father, isn't it? Published, I'm not even sure when it was published, originally in Korean. But it has been translated into English.
Yeah, this one's
thank you very much.
1980.
1980?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's go to a break now. We'll come back and we'll start going through some of the news about the Brexit situation.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
When you get to first realize that a stage of your life is ending and this is your role now, and that's when your mind really starts to say to yourself that you have to either act or think differently than you did when you were even younger, because you're going to be the new husband, you're going to be a new wife, you're going to be like a legal guardian or a person that people will look up to. And for me, when I was going through the process of even walking up on the stage, I was going like, I had never imagined that it will be like this in a million years. And I'm serious when I say that. And
yeah, I think I was really in the moment on that day. Just just so much gratitude that now it's like, now we're making the covenant before God, and now this is real, and now God literally is giving us His blessing. And it was all the stuff that happened before that what made it really difficult, was just completely, it all like melted away, and it just, being there and receiving the blessing just made all the hard work and all the good, just made everything worth it. I just felt so lucky that I was able to finally receive this immense grace from God, and to be able to stand with the best person in the world and get that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, January 27th, 2018. And I'm Tim Elder here with Ted O'Grady, and for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Moon. And let's go to the Brexit situation now. We referred to that a little bit in the first hour. But David Knight has a good interview with a British member of the European Parliament who will bring us up to date on some of the situations regarding Brexit. Let's go ahead and play that interview, please.
It's a good show today, Tim.
Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're going to talk to a member of the European Parliament for Britain, Janice Atkinson. You can find her at her website, janiceatkinson.co.uk. There you can find some of her speeches, some information about her positions on politics. And, of course, we wanted to talk to her to find out what the state of Brexit is, because that is something, I guess the theme of the day is betrayal. There's been a betrayal of Brexit by the Conservative Party. Theresa May, as Nigel Farage has said, it's kind of turned into Theresa Maybe. And I guess maybe now she's Theresa Maybe Not. But we're going to find out from Janice Atkinson. She was elected to the European Parliament in 2014, she says, to secure a referendum on Britain's membership of the EU. And for 20 years, she's campaigned to leave the EU. She calls it sclerotic, undemocratic, expensive, unaccountable. Yeah, right on all of those things. And as she says, her politics are Thatcherism and conservative right. So I guess the lady is not for turning, right, Janice? Welcome.
Hi, morning to everybody.
Thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about what the state of the divorce is. Is it going to go through, or is it going to be called off by Theresa May? I mean, what is happening with it? Because Americans, we followed it very closely as the vote was going up, and I was very excited to see it happen. I looked at it and said, hey, this looks like a Declaration of Independence. I'm all for people taking back control of their government, making government more local. And certainly these multinational organizations have been set up to dominate, to control us, and that's what we were seeing in Britain. So I was glad to see the British people stand up and declare that they were going to take their country back. But what is happening in this process? It's been a very drawn-out process. Is it going to happen?
It's absolutely going to happen because 17.4 million people, 52% of the electorate, actually voted for it. And if we don't deliver, then I fear that there will be rioting on the streets and democracy is lost. I mean, the global elites, because they're meeting in Davos this week, you can see that they're frightened to death of losing control. You've got Theresa the appeaser, as we call her, just trying to appease everybody, rather than actually growing some balls like Margaret Thatcher and telling them, no, we are going and we're going to have free trade deals. But we've got also the Secretary of State, David Davis. He's heading up, leaving the EU department. And quite frankly, he's been dragging his feet. We actually voted to leave the EU nearly 2 years ago.
That's right.
In June of this year. But it took them 9 months to trigger the Article 50, which is the article that actually gives our notice to leave the treaties, etc. And they have been dragging their feet on this. Now, David Davis has made, so apparently, I watched it, a very important speech this afternoon saying that we're going to have this 2-year transition period. Now, in that 2-year transition period, we are handing over cash to the EU because they want a nice, orderly exit. I'm saying, no, you can't hand over cash to the EU. All the MEPs, British MEPs, will be leaving on the 29th of March next year. So we've got taxation without representation.
Yes, absolutely. And you had legislation.
Hey, that's our slogan.
For a long time as well, because they've been telling you to a very fine degree what you can do in and out of your country, telling British fishermen that they couldn't fish in British waters. That kind of micromanagement, taking away government from the people, making it further away, more distant. So you've had legislation without representation, and once the British members of the European Parliament leave, you will have taxation without representation if you have to send them money. But what is this? What is the state of Theresa May? And she's going along with the European Union on this, though, isn't she?
Yeah, but Theresa was always a Remainer. When I was part of the Conservative Party, she was head girl of getting more women into Parliament.
She didn't want to leave.
Exactly.
But David Davis said to me
to remain in the EU.
Well, we don't actually know what Theresa stands for. And 10 years on, we still don't know what Theresa stands for. Theresa stands in the middle, not saying very, very much one way or the other. But luckily, we have got people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Liam Fox, who's the trade secretary, who's very close to America, lining up trade deals once we actually go. And one of the things that David Davis will be doing, the Secretary of Exiting the EU in a few weeks' time, will be telling the EU we will be negotiating free trade agreements that will be implemented on day one that we leave. I mean, I was in Washington a few weeks ago, and I actually met Wilbur Ross, the Secretary of State for Commerce. Fantastic man. And I was in the room with a load of other
especially if the EU continues to unravel. More countries will either leave or wish they had left.
Exactly, but the UK and US have become very, very close in trade agreement, more and more.
Corrupt deal that the EU want to have with you as a trade agreement, because it won't be a real trade agreement. You know, it's a protectionist racket. I'm the only one that stood up and gave him a standing ovation, and that's where we are with it. So I'm so pleased that President Trump is in the White House. I was there on election night drumming up votes for him and pushing him on. And he was the first one to come out and say that we will be at the front of the queue for a trade deal, because the sclerotic
Obama
EU
said that they were going to go to the back of the queue.
Bloc.
You know he's referring to
That's right, yeah.
You're going to get the back of the queue. You don't get on board with the EU. Back of the queue.
Froze there a bit.
It's a black guy talking about someone going to the back of the queue. What's that all about?
All right, yes, that's good. We froze, your transmission froze there for just a second, but we're back. Let's talk a little bit about that, because, what President Trump always wants to do, he makes a big distinction.
They have that problem too, transmissions freezing.
Multilateral trade agreements and bilateral trade agreements. In other words, let's negotiate one-on-one with each country. And certainly the United States, especially under President Trump, is going to be more than willing to do that with Britain. It's in both of our interests to have trade, and he understands that. He's not a protectionist in that sense. What he does not want to do is see trade controlled by some kind of a multinational, multilateral structure. So that's going to be okay. You're going to be fine trading with the United States. But what about situations with Germany or even with Ireland, which wants to say our trade is going to have to be negotiated by the European Union? What are you going to do about the rest of the European countries that remain in the European Union? How is that going to work out?
That's a good question.
Well, at the moment, we export more to the EU than they export to us. And they seem to be speaking with one collective voice at the moment. But Angela Merkel hasn't been able to form a government. The populists are sort of marching forward, my friends from the Alternative Deutschland and others. And behind the scenes, industry is saying to Angela Merkel and the French, you better do a deal. Macron sits on the fence. One minute he's a friend of ours, next minute he's a friend of French industry. But these people need us more than we actually need them, because we have a trade deficit with all of them. I mean, is Angela Merkel seriously saying that she's going to punish Britain for leaving the customs union? We are the biggest buyer of Mercedes-Benz, Siemens products, and beer, actually. And are the French not going to want to trade with
drink a lot of beer,
nuclear
Tim.
power?
Tell you
They own
that.
some of our nuclear
And they drink.
power stations. They run some of our electricity plants. Are they seriously saying they don't want to export their wine to us as well? We're the biggest buyers of wine in the world. So it's not going to happen. So the various federations of industry in the background are lobbying for this. But you can't think of the EU as a united bloc at the moment, because the populists, of which I'm part of which Trump is part of, Marine Le Pen nearly came to take the presidency from Macron. And
that's right. We got to go to a break. We're talking to Janice Atkinson, and when we come back, Ms. Atkinson, I want to talk to you about the fact that Europe is not a unified bloc. Even George Soros is wringing his hands about that. And there's a lot of things going on in a lot of different countries, and it's not just the industry versus the government. We'll be right back with Janice Atkinson.
You're taking the poison pill. Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, instead of looking forward to a low-tax, low-regulation economy, co-signed a letter with other EU finance ministers to denounce Mr. Trump's tax reforms. How dare he? As a Remainer, he is totally trying to sabotage a US deal. A few years ago, in a few years' time, over 90% of world trade will be outside of the EU. Why is Mrs May shackling us to this failing bloc? Yes, business does need certainty, and that's why we should just walk away and move to WTO rules. Voters want an end to immigration. This deal doesn't do it. Voters want an end to the jurisdiction of the ECJ. But Mrs May has signalled another 8 years. This is unacceptable. Let's walk away. Thank you for your time, Monsieur Barnier, but it ain't working.
It ain't working. She's probably from South Essex,
that's
too.
Janice Atkinson. She's a member of the European Parliament for the UK.
True Brit.
She's going to be there for a few more months, I hope.
Working class, family-oriented, Christian.
The British delegation will be leaving the European Parliament as part of the Brexit process. And Ms. Atkinson is a conservative, as you just heard there, supporting the idea of lower tax, lower regulation, and self-government. She stands with others in the European Parliament, like Marine Le Pen, Geert Wilders, and others. And there is a fracturing within Europe of people who want to have their independence. I mean, we're seeing this happening in Catalonia. We see it happening with votes in northern Italy, people wanting to leave that particular country, whether it's Italy or Spain, and have government closer to them. But there's also a lot of tension in these other countries, as we were just talking about, Ms. Atkinson, as to what was going to happen in the relationship between Britain and Germany. Even if Angela Merkel wants to see herself as president of Europe, there are going to be a lot of economic interests in these corporations in her country, in Germany, that are going to say, but we still want to have trade with Britain. I think that is the wave of the future. And it seems like there's a tide that has been turned with the election of President Trump, what people voted for in terms of local self-government against globalism, as well as what we've seen with Brexit and these other movements for independence across Europe. Hello? I think we've frozen again. Do we? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. We're back. Okay, good.
It's a little bit encouraging for us.
Okay, so what you were saying, there is this drive for independence by other countries. Yes, they've certainly been emboldened by what Mr. Trump has been saying, and they've certainly been emboldened by Brexit. But these people have always been there. They've always been the Eurosceptics. I mean, Greece is the basket case of Europe at the moment. They've got 50% youth unemployment, and the Conservatives who are in opposition now, there's certain Conservatives in their party that got so frustrated, they formed another party called Neodexia. Same thing's happening in Spain. Now, the big test of whether people believe in the EU will come clear in Italy's elections, which happen on March the 4th. Now, my friend Matteo Salvini, who's well known in the United States, big Trump supporter, is going into coalition probably with Silvio Berlusconi, the Conservative Party. Matteo believes in having a referendum on the Europe and on the euro, and Italy's future within the EU. And so this goes on. My friends, the Freedom Party of Austria, have just formed the government with a young Turk called Sebastian Kurz, who's quite a sort of right-wing conservative, who rose through his Conservative Party on a ticket of securing borders and controlled migration. And the theme that is uniting all of us is that we believe in the nation state, that the EU has become uncontrollable. On one side, you have communists. On the other side of the parliament, you have the populists, which is us. But any piece of legislation that comes through is actually, the hand of the communists are in there, and the enormous socialist bloc as well that the people are voting for. But in the individual nation states, then they're revolting.
Neo-Stalinist organization.
It's a Soviet Union. Soviet Union of Europe.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to redo what they failed to do in Russia. Now, ironically, Russia's getting all freedom-oriented now.
Imposed migrant quotas like Eastern Europe. George Soros wants, and other people at the top of the Union. And then you've got the Visegrad countries, which is made up of Hungary, the Czech Republic, Romania, and Poland, who are saying no, and they're actually going at odds with the European Union, and the European Union is taking certain countries now to the European Court of Justice, saying that you, directly elected governments of the EU, you're not allowed to impose your own laws. You're not allowed to control who comes into your countries and control your borders. So we're going to sanction you.
This is the effect
of a real
Trump.
tipping point, and the first day
of that is the 4th of March and give a speech.
You know, that's the other thing. It's the hypocrisy of the European Union on human rights, as evidenced by their lack of support for self-governance in Poland or Hungary,
right.
or in the case of
Or in
Catalonia,
Spain. Yeah, Catalonia.
where they would not say anything about the Spanish thugs who were
There we
coming
go.
in there beating people as they were trying to have an election. Everybody says, wait a minute, we need to get Brussels to say something about free elections, and don't you guys support democracy and self-determination?
I mean,
Nothing
that
about
was
that.
shocking.
No,
Really,
no,
just
you're
shocking.
absolutely right. There's another country that's going to face a crisis in probably 18 months' time, which is South Africa. I came back from that country last November and stood up at the beginning of the Strasbourg session, which is our parliamentary session, because they're always talking about
Britain has a
human
very strong
rights,
connection
and
to South
there's only
Africa,
certain
obviously,
pets,
part of the Commonwealth.
humans' rights that actually matter there. And I came back, there was Black Monday, there's been an enormous amount of farm murders in that country. It's almost lawless. And I said I would like to have a debate on the human rights abuses that's going on in South Africa at the moment. Oh, no, can't do that because, the saintly Mandela's legacy is
Saint
still there,
Mandela.
but it's now been corrupted. So I'm having a debate on Tuesday. I've got people coming over from the South African Parliament. I'm going to have my own debate because I think
the
it's
interview,
important
with,
that the world should know what's happening
Simon
in South Africa
from
at
South
the moment.
Africa with the
And
King
actually,
did.
If
He was
if
a
things don't change
Dutch
in
South
18 months'
African
time,
freedom fighter.
Yes, I remember. Yes.
He'd have been hit with a hatchet.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
very tough guy.
Yeah.
What my point about human rights abuses
That's
around
his
the world,
fight.
it
That's
only
right.
Talking about the
matters
white
to
farmers getting murdered, like
subjects,
74 of them.
Countries and
Past
also
year.
certain people around the world that the EU wants to support. They don't want
Here we go.
to have overall democracy arguments and talk about the rule of law.
Yeah,
where
because they're not
countries
in
they
favor of
just wanna turn a
democracy.
blind eye to.
No.
They're in favor of
It's
elitist
that
control.
hypocrisy
Exactly.
on human rights, as well as their
No protection for
hypocrisy
those-
on diversity
private
and on
property there.
multiculturalism. We're talking about all these different countries that
example, now
have
spilling
different
over to South Africa.
languages, different cultures,
same
different
pattern.
governments, different architecture. Everything was different about Europe. That was one of the wonderful things about traveling in Europe.
is
Everything
interesting.
was so close together. I mean, here in Texas, we got to travel for days just to get out of Texas, but there you could go to all these different cultures
It's a great interview,
in
isn't it,
Europe, and what they
David
want to
Knight?
do is deny that to people in the name of multiculturalism. They want to deny that rich tapestry of culture that used to be Europe, and they want to try to homogenize everything under their centralized leadership.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. And within the European Union, they think that one size fits all. So one rule
See how
that you
modest
may
her room
hand
is there?
down for
That's
Poland
why I
doesn't
figure
suit
she
Britain,
know where
doesn't
she's
suit
from.
Greece, or doesn't suit Spain.
South
So
Essex.
we just want to
Working class
homogenize
Churchillian
everything.
Britain, Tim.
Erase our
Churchillian Britain.
history. Some of our countries go back to civilization itself, particularly in Greece and Rome, etc. All that has to be erased. That was last year, and they're absolutely obsessed by gender wars as well. Last time I looked about sort of Heinz 67 varieties of gender and climbing, and what they don't get is
67
actually
varieties
there is
of gender.
two genders.
That was
There's a man
72 in New
and
York.
there's a woman. There's no,
Yeah, they're behind.
You're a lesbian. There's still
They need to
only
catch up.
two
Those are the
genders.
five
They try
are.
to impose this. I mean, Poland is a very Catholic country. It's just come out of 20 years of communist rule, and they are dictated to. You will have open abortion for women now. Again, I'm quite sort of libertarian on these issues, and I know a lot of your listeners aren't. But when you've come out of communism and it's deeply Catholic, you can't just suddenly turn around and say to people, well, you've got to have gay marriage because we have decreed
good
that this
point
is
she's
what
making right
works.
here.
And when an MEP stood up, a Polish MEP stood up and said, look, we can't just impose gay marriage just like that. We're a deeply Catholic country.
Ireland has a problem
One
with this now, Tim,
liberal
you know,
left
same issue.
MEP from
part
Sweden
of
stood
the
up and
EU.
said, I think you're a disgusting
And
creature.
Soros has invested
And
a lot of
I
money in
can't
Ireland
really
to change
say
the
no.
public opinion.
And
Yeah.
Poland
Destroy Ireland.
recently-
But you can't. There are certain things you just can't buy with money.
Hang on,
Exactly,
we got to
yeah.
take a quick break. We got a commercial break coming up.
And right
We're
right
talking
to
to
life
Janice
is so
Atkinson.
strong,
You can find her at
especially within the Catholic,
janiceatkinson.co.uk. She's a
Christian
member of the
Catholic
European
communities,
Parliament. But as you can hear, they
Devout
face the same
Catholic
problems
communities.
there as we do here because it's globalism. We'll talk about Davos when we come back. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Janice Atkinson from the UK. She is a member of the European Parliament, but of course she's been fighting for British independence. They're trying to get Brexit through against the delays and the dragging of Theresa May. She said Teresa the Appeaser.
Yeah, she was southeast.
Talking to them. She was never for Brexit, for independence, but the majority of people in the UK are, and they've seen the same types of pushback
I'm talking about
that we have seen here in America.
I ran around that.
They were
area
all saying you're going to have protectionism, you're going to have doom and gloom projections for the economy and so forth. And what have we seen? We've seen merely the expectation of tax cuts and of regulation cuts set the economy on fire after President Trump was elected. Once we got the tax cuts and the regulation cuts actually
goes out and brings food to the homeless in Liverpool.
Let's listen to this a little bit.
And once the tax cuts went through, we have seen even politically left activist corporations like Apple and even Starbucks.
And as President Trump said, this was not part of the
wages,
plan.
hiring people, giving all of their employees bonuses and that sort of thing. And it is happening worldwide, as they're talking about in Davos. Even many of the people who don't like President Trump personally, and they don't like his nationalism, they love the booming economy that they're enjoying worldwide. They're projecting that it's going to add about $5 trillion to the world's domestic production. And so I wanted to get your perspective on what's going on at Davos, Janice, as President Trump spoke there today.
Yeah, I know. It's. I think that Davos should just be left to the skiers now. The globalists get together for, you can have yoga, meditation, breakfast seminars. It's where the celebrities, the protesters, the Spibs and the Sharks go. But it costs you $31,000 to actually attend.
Well, these people can't afford it. I mean, they've got like 1,000 private jets that have flown in here. I mean, this is an air traffic control nightmare and a global warming nightmare for these people who are snowed under with feet on feet of snow here.
I know, the hypocrisy knows no bounds. My own former Chancellor, George Osborne, flew in, and this is the man that increased air passenger duty. So a family of four going on a hard-earned 2-week holiday to somewhere like Spain or even Disneyland, it's going to cost them hundreds and maybe even £1,000 more to go. But yeah, the 1,000 private jets fly in and they dictate to the rest of us. That's the hypocrisy that I absolutely hate. Rather than talking about, do we have the right political institutions to maintain freedom by experts meeting together? No, they don't talk about how we maintain freedom and peace. That's why I think it should be left to the skiers, because they're not talking about the real issues. Even Klaus Schwab, the founder of Davos, he didn't understand why people voted for Trump and Brexit. He didn't understand that he talks about them clinging on to the nation state and national sovereignty out of fear of change. I think that's just unbelievable arrogance. And then there's the British Davos member, the guy in charge of migration, is a guy called Khalid Koza, a member of a British Empire member. That's a title bestowed on by the Queen. He claims that too much attention is focused on national security, terrorism, crime, and extremism. If the global elite are not there to discuss those things that really matter to us, the people, and that's one of the reasons why we voted Brexit and for Trump, then what the hell are they there for? Just be honest about it. It's just the global elites coming together, have a good powwow. Okay, we're all fine. The world order is going to be okay because we can get rid of Trump and perhaps we can just airbrush Brexit out of history and we can all carry on. It's business as usual.
Well, this is what John Kerry was saying to Mahmoud Abbas. We'll get rid of Trump within a year, so don't worry. Don't give up. Just hang on.
Contrast Davos with Bilderberg. At Davos, it's all publicity, and they've got movie stars coming in. We got Elton John this year.
John Kerry being the former Secretary of State of the U.S. and
he was the
Mahmoud Abbas being the head of the Palestinian Authority,
attacking Trump and anybody that was nationalist. But they have it's very public, very open. They put all of the speeches out there and the different agendas, which in and of themselves are actually kind of frightening if you look at the details of those agendas.
JFK.
But when they go to Bilderberg,
that's right.
Everything there is very, very secretive. And what they tell us is that at Bilderberg, they're just getting together to have some private conversations. We've got Chatham House rules, and so we're not going to tell you what's going on. When we were there in Copenhagen, and I think it was 2014,
they meet outside of Virginia recently, right?
My wife got footage of Ed Balls, and he was coming in, and he didn't have his badge, and he started going through his carry-on luggage looking for it, and it opened up and spilled out, and it was nothing but paperwork. I mean, this was not his clothes and his shaving kit. This was a suitcase full of papers to do business there. That's where they really do business, is at Bilderberg, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and most of us don't get the chance to go there. Even though I'm an elected representative, I've never been invited to these things, and I certainly wouldn't pay $31,000 of British UK taxpayers' money to go off to Davos. These closed societies, it's a bit like the Freemasons, it's all the conspiracy theories, but that's where they come out of, and this is where they do their dirty deals. And people recognise this. And because of social media now, all this is being uncovered. People are not duped by Bilderberg and Davos. It bears no relation to how you pay your taxes. Can you afford to pay your heating bills because the global elite have decided that because of global climate change that they're going to put 20% taxes onto your gas and electricity bills? It's got nothing to do with that. The education of our children, because of uncontrolled migration, we can't get children into primary schools and secondary schools here. But that's never discussed in Davos. No, it's the global elite thinking, okay, we can take in 10 million from Africa. We can take the people into the Middle East from the wars that actually we've caused. That's no problem because it suits them, because it drives wages down. None of that is ever discussed on a public platform. That's all done by dirty deals behind the scene. But luckily, social media now and fantastic shows like this is unearthing this and showing them up for what they are.
That's right. Yeah. When you look at some of the things that they openly talk about at Davos, things about, chimeras and synthetic biology and artificial intelligence, what they're looking at is the next level of control. Because it isn't going to simply be bringing in people to break down a society. And we understand, you and I understand, that that's what's behind the open borders. They're bringing in people from other countries deliberately to deconstruct these countries. But that's just the step one. The step two is to impose a very high-tech control structure. I mean, people like Zbigniew Brzezinski were openly talking about the technocratic elite, and it's been this technological advantage that they have that they're going to be really pressing in the next few years. So I think it's very, very important that we start to get our independence back, that we start to get government closer to us so that we can respond to those types of coming control structures on our infrastructure, on our society, on our communications, as we see these large companies that are always at these globalist confabs like Google and Facebook and so forth, imposing a kind of censorship on the internet.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Technology is fantastic, and artificial intelligence, if it's used in the right way, is absolutely fantastic as well.
End it about
Your
there.
country's leading on this. My country's leading on this.
Okay, thank you. A very interesting interview by David Knight, and she mentioned the EU breaking down, but she did not mention Finland. I didn't hear her mention Finland. No. And Finland is having the first round of their presidential election this Sunday, and a populist or sovereignty candidate, let's call them sovereignty candidates, all right, is expected to do well there in this first round tomorrow. In this article in Express UK paper, Finland election brings new threat to EU, the Brexit-backing Farage fan vying for Finexit.
Finexit, I like that.
And it says that Laura... I don't know if I should try and pronounce this. Huhtasaari, a 38-year-old former teacher, is trying to bring anti-immigration populist ideas back to mainstream Finnish politics, and her campaign for the presidency has seen her reputation soar ahead of the first round of voting on Sunday. Her Finns party has employed tactics from a variety of populist politicians, echoing Donald Trump with her Finland First slogan, and French presidential candidate Marine Le Pen, who used nationalism as a key theme in her campaign. Her Eurosceptic rhetoric sounds a lot like that of former UKIP leader Nigel Farage, even telling of her admiration for the 53-year-old Brexit campaign, as she told supporters to take their country back. She said, "I look at Nigel Farage's example. It took 17 years, but Brexit came. I don't plan to wait that long." She claims the EU has turned Finland into its province and has railed against the country's political elite, who she argues do not represent the working class. Huhtasaari has also demanded more immigration controls and has campaigned in favor of a burqa ban, a far cry from Finland's traditional subdued politics. She told Politico, "I'm here to remind people that the Finns party is truly an alternative to the mainstream. I want to change the direction of Finland and take back our independence." Finland is a little bit late. If you compare it to other European countries, anti-immigration parties are winning, and people are waking up everywhere. They're waking up now here too. The rise of the Finns party candidate has certainly not gone unnoticed, according to an expert on right-wing populism at the University of, I have no idea how to pronounce that one. She said she's circulating the rhetoric of many other populist leaders. It doesn't matter if what she says is true or not. Her supporters still stand by her. This is a new phenomenon for Finland. Before the rise of the Finns party, we were used to a very subdued form of politics. But that's changing. Politics is becoming more emotional. Despite Huhtasaari's incredible rise, she is unlikely to snatch the presidency. Incumbent president is extremely popular, and recent polls suggest he will be re-elected without a major challenge. However, Huhtasaari's newfound niche in Finland politics represents yet another headache for the EU, and her profile shows no signs of diminishing. Finland's presidential elections are set to be held on 28th of January, with a second round on 11th of February, if necessary. We'll see what we'll report again on that on Monday to see how well she does. But this is one more sign of the EU's unraveling that's going on.
Yeah. And also, it's a fact when Trump speaks, Tim, he's speaking to the people.
Yes.
It's not just Davos Group, but to the elites. So they're all hearing that message.
Yeah.
And this lady's only 38 years old. Finland, of course, borders Sweden. So they're looking at what's happened in Sweden,
Yes.
and they can see the handwriting on the wall.
Yes.
So, I mean, it indicates to me how important, shall we say, sovereignty-centered political action is. You know, we've got the King talks about this, how Christianity has dropped the ball in separating from the political sphere, particularly after the Johnson Amendment, right?
Yeah.
But now's the time, really, we can see where the battle is in the political sphere.
Well, even
locally.
not just the Johnson Amendment, but also even starting with rapture theology, as he points out.
Yes.
Rapture theology was developed in the 19th century and spread to seminaries, and he puts the blame for that on Rockefeller and people like him to remove Christians from the political sphere, from the political debate. And we see the results of that very clearly now.
Yeah.
Whereas if you, this is what Europe is doing, it's removing Judeo-Christianity from the political debate and substituting their own sort of a globalist ideology. It's an ideology that they have. And as was pointed out in the interview with David Knight, homogenizing Europe and just imposing gay marriage on Poland, for example,
Right.
and just imposing, even though this is a strongly Catholic country, just saying, okay, well, you know, this is the law of the land, and you have to follow.
And abortion as well.
And abortion as well. And the Polish representative getting up and said, you just can't do that. And also, not only that, but also imposing quotas for receiving migrants from Middle East and North Africa, many of whom or some of whom are going to turn out to be terrorists. And but even without that, even the assimilation process just doesn't work.
No.
And East European countries or Central European countries are standing up and saying, you just can't do this. That's the reason that Brussels now is losing more and more power, because people are standing up against it, up against it, and it's not going to stop. I don't know how and I guess they were pointing out just now that the next stage is to install a new level of control using artificial intelligence.
Well, what it is
maybe that's where the elite are placing their hopes, that they can take back their power through artificial intelligence. If that's the case, we'll have to stand up. And that's why in the Chunuk Constitution, no human rights are given to anything or genetically modified organism.
Right.
You have to be a genetically unmodified organism, God's creation, God's human being, a human being created by God, in order to have human rights under the Chunuk Constitution.
I mean, you think about it, that's a very prescient phrase in Chunuk.
Yes,
that's
people are wondering,
that's a revelation from God right there.
People were wondering when the king first put that out. What's this about? Non-GMO. But now it's becoming very obvious. Artificial intelligence is a tremendous threat. It would be a tremendous threat if we did not have that phrase in the Chunuk Constitution. But now we can deal with that threat because of that phrase in the Chunuk Constitution.
See, what you have, Tim, in Europe is Balkanization because of radical Islam. Now, we have a brother in Britain, David Earl in Birmingham, which is heavily Muslim. There have been high percentage of Muslim population in Britain for a long time, but through Father's interfaith activity, you know, we were restoring a lot of having a lot of influence in the Islamic world. Of course, all that collapsed with the failure of the Han mother, and this is what's been the result of it. But what is it? And speaking of my own experience living in Britain for 14 years, okay, people are cowed. People are afraid to speak out. People are afraid to express their religious views. It's bad form. They have this internal barrier within their minds. If they speak out too strongly, they're going to be arrested. And the government uses this. A guy like Tommy Robinson, for example, who's harassed by police when he goes out, he wants to go out to a football game with his kids. So, like the King said in his report the other day, he went to Switzerland for a few days, and it's full of beta males. And with skinny jeans and all this, and I feel a little badly hearing that. I say, hey, wait a minute, you know, they're not all beta males in England, in Europe, okay?
He did make an exception for sanctuary members, yes.
Okay, so we're all growing into our alpha maleship, okay? You know, we all have that course to go through. But the point is that because people have been cowed and intimidated is the word, by the central government, and mentally and psychologically intimidated by the culture, that's starting to break down when you see someone like Janice Atkinson. And my friend I mentioned, Mark Hobbs, okay? He does the street ministry. One day he went out street preaching in Oxford Circle. I was supposed to go with him. I was deathly sick that day. I wasn't able to go with him. He went out on his own, street preaching for Jesus Christ in downtown London. And he said it was the most scary experience of his life, but also the most exhilarating experience of his life. So that's the kind of thing we have to do. Put our necks on the line to break down this, which is really just a psychological, a mental hold.
Yes.
And if they come along and put us in jail, hey, you know, we can be in jail for a little while. It's not so bad to be in jail in Britain. I mean, I had a friend of mine that had to go to jail because he had a little altercation with his wife. He spent 19 months in jail, in prison. He had plenty of sports. He had free education. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to go to prison, so it's not so bad.
All right, let's take a break now, and we'll come back in 5 minutes, and we'll have another video, this time by Senator Rand Paul, about libertarianism.
That'll be
when their lives have only begun. The
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, January 27th of 2018. Tim Elder and Ted O'Grady, and for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Ji-moon. And I want to begin this hour with a speech by Senator Rand Paul, who is known as a libertarian. And he's speaking to a group of 90 Christian students who are members of the Christian Student Leadership Conference. And this group seeks to recruit and encourage young evangelical students to serve in the government. I'm very impressed by this speech because many times libertarians are anti-religion or maybe even atheist or agnostic. They don't have anything to do with religion because they are against any form of control over people, or most forms of control. And they see religion as one of those forms of control. It was, and rightly so, because Catholic Church, not only the Catholic Church, but also many Protestant churches as well, have this a vertical sort of control structure, and libertarians are against that kind of a thing. But in this speech, Rand Paul talks about the relationship between principles of faith and libertarianism, and I think that's very important because the Cheongguk Constitution is a libertarian republican monarchy, and it is you could say it is a marriage of libertarianism and True Father's teachings. Marriage, well, actually, when you think about it, True Father is a libertarian.
I never thought of True Father.
Yeah, he is a libertarian because he believes in sovereignty resting with the family, and that the government having little, a minimal role in society. But that for example, he said that crime can be punished within the family. For example,
did say
that kind of thing. And he talked about a society where there are no lawyers or prosecutors, judges, or police. And he talked about the peace police, the peace militia, which calls on members of society, individual members of society, to take responsibility for safety in society and also the security of the nation. Anyway, let's watch Senator Rand Paul speaking to the members of the Christian Student Leadership Conference now. Go ahead.
Good morning. I see you've already met my colleague, Mike Lee. He's a good guy, and we do a lot of things together and work on a lot of projects together.
Yes.
You might be scratching your head and asking yourself, what is a libertarian doing talking to a bunch of evangelical students? Aren't libertarians crazy? Aren't they kind of scary? And I think it's a misconception sometimes because when you hear the word libertarian, you think, well, gosh, libertarians, they want anything goes, right? No rules, no laws, you can do whatever you want. And it's not exactly what we advocate. Libertarians do advocate freedom, liberty. We advocate government ought to leave you alone and that you ought to get to make choices on your own. But would that mean lawlessness? Would that mean no rules, anything goes? Well, even libertarians believe in some sort of rules. And so one of the rules that libertarians believe in is something called the non-aggression principle. And this is a principle really that when you hear it, you'll say, well, gosh, most government is founded upon this. The non-aggression principle means that under a libertarian society, if we had one, you pretty much could do whatever you wanted as long as you didn't hurt somebody else. So as long as you didn't invade their sphere of their rights, you could kind of do what you wanted. And you say, well, gosh, then there still would be all kinds of crazy things. Everybody would be doing heroin, there'd be prostitution, there'd be all these things. And really, many of us who are Christian and libertarian believe that not only would you be restrained by government from doing things that would harm somebody else, but that a libertarian society or even a republic, as we were intended to be, would have some kind of restraint. And some people have described it as virtue. Washington described the beginning of the republic, and he said it would be necessary for our country to succeed to have virtue. So you'd have the idea that the government would restrain you from harming other individuals, but there has to be something that also guides us, that keeps us
we have to go back to our founding principles.
On the straight and narrow, allows us to cooperate as a civilized society, allows us to be an advanced society. Think of it this way. There are laws against stealing, and there should be, but how many in here would steal if there were not a law against stealing? Oh, good. I'm glad. We don't have any thieves here today. But the thing is most of us don't steal. Most of us don't rape, murder, do all these horrific things, not because there's a law against it, but because we have a sense of right and wrong. We have a moral compass. We have something grounded in religion. We have this sense of virtue. And you think, well, how many people have this? And that's sort of the question of where a society goes over a long period of time. Some would argue that we had more virtue 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. That may or may not be true, but there's at least some argument to that. Some who look at Europe say that they've abandoned religion and they've become much more secular, and they've sort of lost their sense of right and wrongs in some ways. So really you have to have both. You have to have a government that restrains you from harming someone, but you also want to have a people that is a virtuous people.
Talking about the Chernobyl Constitution here, I think.
There's a theologian by the name of Os Guinness, and he puts it this way. He says that liberty requires restraint, but the only restraint consistent with liberty is self-restraint. And so the reason why that's important is we often see, particularly from Christians, they come to Washington and they say, government we've got all these terrible, immoral things happening. Government has to fix them. When in reality, it may be that there are some things that do need fixing that perhaps we can't fix. And I'll give you an example. The number one correlation, causation, whatever you want to have it, with poverty in our country. If we say we want to wipe out poverty, what's the number one thing that is linked to poverty in our country? It's having children before you're married. I'm not here to moralize or tell you, what's right or wrong. I'm just here to tell you that is the number one link. If you look at charts, there's a book by Charles Murray called Coming Apart at the Seams, and he does 2 categories of charts on everything, all the socioeconomic, all the income, everything about your life, and there are 2 tracks. One, people who don't finish high school and have children before they're married, and they're here along the bottom of the x-axis. And then you see at the very top of our society, the top elite, and these aren't all true, but they're mostly true, just generalizations, people who finish college and wait to have kids. But then you say, well, what's government going to do about this? I can't make you wait. So really, sometimes when I agree with a group of ministers, they say, what are you going to do to make us a better, more moral nation? I say, well, what are you going to do? And really, there has to be some of that. And I think there has to be this realization the government can't do everything for you. You have to be part of it. And it doesn't mean it's not important. It doesn't mean that virtue is not important. It doesn't mean that we don't want virtuous people in government. But it means that government's not going to make us a virtuous society. And I think that's very important when we think about what we want from government and where we're going. A second way of looking at this would be on the idea of rights. So the right to be left alone, the right to practice your religion, the right to have property, the right to have speech, all of these rights that are sort of in the Bill of Rights. Did the government grant you these rights, or did they pre-exist government and the government guarantees these rights? And it's very important when we look at rights because many of us who see the Founding Fathers and talk about the idea of natural rights or God-given rights, we think they're innately yours. The right to speak, to practice your religion, to keep the fruits of your earning. These are yours. They're just inherently yours. Now you say, well, we have to give up something to be in a society, right? Well, there are certain things, like for example, your property. As you go out and you earn your check and you get your check and you've worked 2 weeks, a portion of it's taken by the government. And you say, well, aren't they taking my stuff? Well, they are, and we have this idea, maybe not explicit, but we have this idea of a social compact. So you say, we're going to live in a civilized world and part of my check's going to be taken. And so we kind of implicitly agree to this, but if at the end of 2 weeks you were to make $600 and you got your check and it said minus $600 and your net was zero, how many people would like living in that society? Then 100% of the fruits of your labor would belong to government, would be taken from you. So the question always is, when we look at issues like this, whose money is it? Well, I think it's yours. Are you willing to give up some of it? Yes, but I want to minimize how much I give of it because I want to maximize my freedom and my ability to either give it to my church, help the people in my community, or help my family. And so really it's always a question of maximum or minimum. How much government do you want? You want the least amount of government that we need, because the more government you have, or the more of your paycheck you give up, the less of your freedom you have. And so this is the tug of war, but I think it's an interesting way of looking at it when you try to decide, do you want more government or less government? Do you want government to do X or Y? Is government good at doing things? You ask yourself, if you have $100, if each of you had $100 and you were going to give it to somebody, if you thought, I really want to help people, would you give it to the federal welfare system, or would you give it to the Salvation Army? I wouldn't hesitate for a second. There's no way I would send $1 up here that I didn't have to, because they're just not very good at it. They're so far away from the people that can't do it, but I can see in my community what the Salvation Army does. I can go to the homeless shelter. I can go to Helping Hands in Christ and see how they help people pay their bills. Now you say, well, government does do some good for people. They probably do, but they're horribly inefficient at it. And so you say, well, we need government to take care of people. It's like, these are the people that can't run the post office. All right? They have a monopoly on delivering letters and they lose $1 billion a quarter. They're just not very good at it.
Wow.
So government is best that governs least. So you have the most amount of freedom. But government is also best that governs at a more local level. Doesn't make it perfect, but you can at least see it. Your city councilman or city councilwoman lives down the street. You can talk to her about, or him about, an idea about how you might have better sidewalks or how we might do something for the homeless in our community. But if you send it up here, we will throw lots of money at it and it won't be any better. Department of Education. We didn't have it when I was a kid. We have it now, and our scores are maybe not any better than they were before we had the Department of Education.
We got Antifa.
You say, well, should government be involved in education? Well, there wasn't any provision for it in the Constitution. You say, well, no government? What would happen? What would happen if the Department of Education disappeared tomorrow? What would happen to us? Probably nothing. The thing is most of your taxes that support your schools are from local taxes. In Kentucky, 95% of our taxes are from Kentucky taxes. And we have a Department of Education there, but we duplicate everything. So the Department of Education has had all these teaching standards and testing standards, and then Kentucky does the same thing, and they're spending millions of dollars doing the same thing the Department of Education is doing. We take all these tests, and the teachers are forced to teach to the test, and then in the end, we're not really positive whether anybody's any smarter other than they can take these tests. And there still are those who argue that we're not doing
tests
better.
And all this Department of
One of the
Education.
things I think we could do in education is allow more freedom.
Allow more freedom in education.
Thank you. That was a portion of Rand Paul's speech. I think we got the meat of it. And I think, to me, the most important line there is that government cannot create a virtuous society.
No.
Government does not make you virtuous.
No.
Cannot do that. So that also means that the Cheonryu government also cannot create a virtuous society.
Absolutely
doesn't it? Yeah. But what the Cheonryu Constitution does, though, is that it creates an environment or a society in which virtuous people are able to succeed, whereas non-virtuous people will have a hard time.
Yeah.
And the king has pointed out that in Cheonryu, reputation will be important.
Yes.
Reputation will be important. And that the role of government in Cheonryu society will be to provide, to increase transparency. All right, so that if there are people who are acting in an unvirtuous way, what's the opposite of virtuous? In a bad way,
okay.
Right? Then this will be shown to all. Look at what this guy's doing. You know,
right.
And we're beginning to see some of that in the sanctuary community, by the way.
Okay.
So when people acquire a certain reputation, it becomes more difficult for them to operate.
Yeah.
So to get along or to function well in society, it's important to have a good reputation.
Yes.
In other words, a reputation of being a virtuous person. So the government cannot make us virtuous, but the government can provide an environment in which virtuous people are able to do well. And bad people, non-virtuous people, have a hard time.
Yeah.
And then this provides a lesson to others so that they naturally want to become virtuous. So over time, the society becomes more and more virtuous on its own by people's own voluntary decisions. Not that government is forcing me, for example, as Rand Paul said. The government, we don't steal not because there's a law against it, but because we have a sense of right and wrong. So who instills that right? Well, parents, of course, but society also can show the consequences of certain choices.
Yeah.
The Cheonryu Constitution does not, in fact, it forbids the banning of intoxicating substances, such as marijuana, even such as heroin. Cheonryu Constitution does not outlaw prostitution.
Right.
All right? It does not say you cannot have pride. The Children's Constitution does not outlaw homosexuality. Does not.
Right.
But it creates a society in which people who engage in those practices, who engage in those acts, will have a difficult time.
Yeah.
And because the Children's Constitution does say that the government cannot support or provide benefit for any form of marriage other than the heterosexual monogamous marriage. So those people will provide a lesson to others of what happens when you make certain choices. So over time, the society will become more and more virtuous, and that is the libertarian society where people make their own choices, choose good out of their own choice.
Exactly. Yeah. What I found here in the sanctuary, very interesting. What you're saying here is. The CIG Constitution is like the political framework to allow what the principle calls the freedom of the original mind.
Yes.
So and this is what you see like in Europe with these freedom movements, how much they have to struggle to express the freedom of their original mind because of the pterodactyl nature of the political system, right? And so it is an experiment that we're going through here. But what I've found personally with myself, my own process of growth, seeing other things here, on the micro level, is, as you say, we are never forced to do anything here. And this is something that I think for us older Unification Church members and Family Federation members have a very hard time wrapping our head around that. It's like seeing you one time in that town meeting, and people were expressing their views, and you said, well, who's stopping you? And the king says the same thing, but it's a mental thing. But what I've found is that by allowing that, and the king never violates that, by the way. The king is very consistent.
He's very consistent.
By never violating that, okay, it allows us, what the principle calls the freedom of the original mind, to start working. So then the choice becomes clear. You see your choices. If I do this, these are going to be the consequences.
Consequences, yes.
If I do this, these are going to be the consequences.
That's
exactly. And it's up to me.
Yes.
It's up to me.
That's a transparent society.
Exactly. And it's up to me to make that choice.
Yes.
But there are consequences in each choice. Whereas we have a situation now with the social justice warriors and the generation that's been educated, the past 20 years, the millennials or whatever, under this Department of Education, where it's always someone else's fault. It's always the white guy or that guy or Trump, or why doesn't the government do something? It's making excuses. And it's kind of like, I could say in my own spiritual life, I can look at my life of 40 years as a Unification Church member. It was kind of, there's always a bit of an excuse. There's always a bit of, well, if things had been this way, my result would have been better. And by keeping that little sort of door open in your head, we're actually never stepping into what we're doing now, which is sovereignty. This is the blessing. This is the blessing that we have now, to have the choice before us, Tim, to choose sovereignty or choose another path. And also knowing that that choice is ours alone, and there are consequences to those choices. Yes. And it's no one's responsibility but my own to make that choice. And the beauty of the Channel Constitution, and I think the battle of, if we look in the context of biblical history, the entire course from the fall right through the whole bloodline, is that we have the victorious lineage, as we spoke about this morning in the Rima, the 3 generations from Jesus Christ, from
Adam and Jesus,
Father,
true
Adam,
Father.
Jesus, and true Father, and now we see the expression of it through our second king, through the training the second king is doing.
And Father actually planted that lineage on earth, created a family for the first time.
And he did. Father did that, and it's explicitly written down in the Chanukya Constitution. And that is there. That's an eternal victory of God. And that's the thing that is going to allow, as you say, over time, the freedom of the original mind within human beings to operate. And yes, you will see the bias of that society is to choose the good. And the founders talked about virtue. Benjamin Franklin talked about this Constitution is for a virtuous society and no other. And they were virtuous people. George Washington was a very virtuous person. They were very attentive to their internal attitudes when this republic was founded. So we're seeing a shift, we're seeing a return to that, and every day for us, Tim, it's like, I don't know what it is like for you, but for me, I've got to wake up every day and recommit myself and make those choices, because the choice is always there. The choice is always there. I can make this choice, I can make this choice. Whatever choice I make is going to have consequences, and I'm 100% responsible for those consequences. That to me is that will be the nature of God's kingdom.
In a small example, which is quite relevant in this particular moment, last Sunday I mentioned that registration for the upcoming blessing is voluntary.
Right.
And I was surprised to see that there was a kind of a reaction from this.
Okay.
Because actually we've been saying this since the first blessing took place in April of 2015. But apparently some people have heard it for the first time. So the good news is that after all these years, some people are finally listening. But there was a reaction against this.
What was the reaction?
Well, how do you know how many people are going to take the blessing then? How many people? How do you know?
Yeah.
How
are you going to know?
How are you going to know?
They don't have to register?
And the answer is
register, right?
The answer is we don't.
Yes, we don't have to know.
We don't have to know. We don't need to know. But you know who knows? God knows.
And I know. I know myself. That's even more important.
Yes. And you'll find out when you get to Spirit World whether your name is in the Book of Life or not.
But you know what? If we're really honest with ourselves, though, Tim, we can know that right now.
Those are the consequences.
We can know that right now where we're going to be in Spirit World.
Yes.
There's no secrets.
That's
we know ourselves. And Father talked about this. Father talked about the conscience. You know the conscience is where God dwells. You know where you are. Don't kid yourself. We know. I know where I look in the mirror. I know where I am. I know where I am right now.
And so the sanctuary community is a free association of blessed central families under True Father's authority. It's a free association. So the words "free association," think about what that really means. Well, it means, for one thing, you don't have to register for the blessing. Now, you can if you want. Some people want to register. That's fine.
Okay.
And some people say, well, if we don't register, how will you know where to send our holy wine? Well, of course, then, you got to give us an address.
You're just going to get some holy wine.
I mean, there are some
use your ingenuity.
But then you're voluntarily providing that data. We are not requiring it. And so there's a big difference there. You see, there's between because you can get the holy wine from other places.
Sure.
By the way. You can. Your neighbor receives the holy wine, or someone in your town receives the holy wine, and that person can multiply it and give it to you. You don't have to get the holy wine directly from us.
What Father wanted to do,
as long as you trust your the guy who's giving it to you, that he's actually giving you the real stuff. So again,
that's important.
That's important. Again, you'll find out when you get to Spirit World. But anyway,
we want to know now, Tim.
So anyway,
forget about getting the Spirit World.
I mean, some people want to receive the blessing, but they have concerns about being known to have done this. They might get, might have consequences with with their families and friends and all that kind of stuff, and they might lose their job or anything like that. So you can donate to Sanctuary anonymously through PayPal Giving Fund. By the way, you can also receive the blessing anonymously. So because as the King keeps emphasizing. It's about a relationship between you and God, between you and True Father.
You see how merciful God is.
It's not about organization. It's not about joining an organization.
Right. That's the point, isn't it? So important, Tim. And I appreciate you, Tim. You're always so clear and strong about this, Tim. And I'm growing into a greater appreciation of my elder brother every day.
Thank you very much. Having said that, FYI, we have a lot of expenses, folks. So we do need your help. So please, if you value what Sanctuary and the King's Ministry is doing, please do support us with your contributions. But it's voluntary. All right, it's voluntary. Yes,
beautiful.
In the past in Korea. When someone worked for a company that was, founded by True Father, 10% of their pay was deducted and sent to the church in some cases. Yes, there was a time. It didn't last very long. It didn't last very long. But there was that kind of an attempt. Yes, there was that kind of attempt. We would never do that kind of a thing here because it is entirely voluntary. But just keep in mind that for just keep in mind the practical realities that we do have expenses, and that your donations are very much appreciated. We did have a total income last year of slightly over $1.2 million, second year in a row that we passed that $1.2 million mark, although the total income was down just slightly from the previous year, and we'll be giving a full report on that before long.
It's not a lot.
1.2 million?
It's not a lot.
Not a lot? Okay, well, it's a lot more than the king started with, I'll tell you that.
Well, God is blessing the ministry, but yes. I mean, in terms of what our ambitions are.
Yes, hey. In terms of what but you see, also there,
yeah,
the vision is not to have a
exactly
this kind of a thing,
right?
All right, so I think the vision is to have a lot. So that, as I say, we are a free association of blessed families under two fathers' authority, each of whom have their own ministries, all right?
And their own kingdoms, right?
Their own kingdoms. So those kingdoms are united how? By legal structure, by organizational structure? No. They're united by a common shared commitment to true father's lineage,
yes.
to the kingship. All right. So we don't envision a situation where everything is controlled by some central authority.
Right.
All right. Each blessed central family has their own ministry, which they control.
Yes.
They control.
Yes.
And voluntarily, out of their own sense of providence and their own religious faith, they support the king voluntarily.
Yes.
All right. So there's no sort of legal requirement of doing that. And so,
exactly.
Yeah, people will fall away.
Yeah,
it's a free association. People are free to come. People are free to go. So some people will fall away, and they will try something else for a while. But if we are on the true path, if Father truly is the way and the truth and the life, and then eventually they will return.
Yes.
They will return, even if they sort of go off on a side street for a while.
Right, by the freedom of their original mind is going to pull them back.
That kind of enforced control is not necessary.
No,
and it is not only not necessary; it's actually detrimental to creating God's kingdom. Father talked about God's love, God's true love. In several places, he talks about true love. He uses the analogy of the bee. The honeybee.
Okay, yeah.
The honeybee.
Okay.
Where the honeybee goes to a flower. If you read this,
yes.
Goes to a flower and, sticks its, I don't know what you call that needle in there, and it's sucking out the nectar.
Yeah.
And it will not separate itself from that flower until it is done.
Right.
And Father says that you can actually pull that bee, and it sounds like he may have done this when he was a child.
Sure he did.
You can actually pull that bee, but the bee will not separate itself from that flower. And he says you can actually pull that bee until you actually pull the rear half of it off, so that you sort of pulling limb from limb, I guess you can say. But even then, the bee will not let go of that. And that he says that is true love. So once you've tasted it, once you've tasted true love, you will never want to separate yourself from it, no matter what. And so that is the thing that binds us together. Not an organizational control. And that is the libertarian, that is the godly libertarianism. And I think that Rand Paul was alluding to a little bit. He said he defined it in terms of our sense of right and wrong, that we have virtue, we have a sense of right or wrong. But he could, as hope in the future he comes to know Father's teachings, I'm sure he will come to realize that it's more than that. It's actually this taste of true love that we have. And you notice how even when people leave the Unification Church, they're still obsessed with the Unification Church. They write books about the Unification Church, and they go on TV and do interviews about the Unification Church. They're obsessed with the Unification Church.
Why is that?
Why is that?
Yeah, because they've tasted
true love. Yes, they've tasted true love.
I tasted true love when I met Father.
Yeah.
You never let go.
Ah, yes. But
I thought maybe, Tim, we could talk a little bit about DACA, because I think this is related with Rand Paul's talk.
Okay,
but David and I talked about that. in regard to Trump betraying the base with the immigration policy. But I was thinking in terms of the political situation in America. If we deal strongly with immigration in the southern border, okay, if we're able to enforce our laws, okay, and control the immigration situation, then we could actually see the demise of the Democratic Party. And then what may emerge could be a two-party system with a sort of a Republican and Libertarian. And I kind of feel like this is a really critical issue right now with DACA. Have we got something to say about that?
Well, let's look at the top story on Breitbart, which is about that, about this organization that is anti-immigration, that say that what the White House is proposing now is, and by the way, President Trump initially was going to propose something on Monday. I think that plan may have changed because of, like you say,
he's got a lot of blowback on this.
Getting a lot of blowback from the base, but we'll see what he has to say. But Fair being the name of the organization, firmly opposed to White House immigration reform framework, amnesty, we're going to kill it, they say. Two representatives of the Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR, held a live online broadcast on Friday expressing firm opposition to the new White House immigration reform framework. It's stark change from what the president campaigned on and called for supporters to help them kill it. FAIR Government Relations Director R.J. Holman said the framework a sea change from President Donald Trump's campaign platform. The newly released White House framework on immigration reform and border security would give a pathway to citizenship for an estimated 1.8 million. They say 1.8 million, but I think it's actually less than a million.
They're talking about
maybe their parents as well.
800,000 or something.
Yeah, 800,000. Let's be honest, we don't know.
We don't know. They're not all registered.
Yeah, there you go, yeah. In the United States, over 10 to 12 years, $25 billion is allocated for a trust fund for the border well system, ports of entry-exit, and northern border improvements and enhancements. The visa lottery will be ended and reallocated to reduce the family-based backlog and high-skilled employment backlog. It looks like a complete disaster because it's the same problem you always have. Once you do an amnesty, it sends a clearer message to the rest of the world that the borders are open, said FAIR Research Director Matt O'Brien. He said the other problem is that it would not be 1.8 million people amnestied, but many times that. So anyway, we have this blowback from the base. Yeah, and President Trump did campaign on this, didn't he?
Yes.
So he's kind of put himself in a difficult position where he has to deal with this situation. But but I think people they call their organization FAIR. But if you want to talk about FAIR, put yourself in the position of a child, maybe 2, 3, 4 years old, who was brought here by his or her parents and grew up in America, American schools and so forth. Maybe speaks a smattering of Spanish enough to talk to their parents at home. But really their first language for all intents and purposes is English. And they are, if they are productive members of a U.S. society, receiving an education or have jobs and not on unemployment and so forth, which is difficult to do when you come here illegally because you have the problem of a social security number and without that and so forth. So if they are doing that, and I know some people who are able to do well in American society without a social security number. There are ways to do that. You got to ask, is it fair to us or to them to say, okay, you came here illegally regardless of the circumstances, so we're going to send you back. I really feel that American society, Americans as a whole, have to take responsibility for not enforcing our borders in the first place. It was partly our responsibility that their parents were able to come in the first place. That we had this history of not enforcing our borders. We should have done this earlier.
Sure.
All right. So we're cleaning up a mess that was created, and partly by our failure to enforce the border.
Sure.
So I think to put all the responsibility and all the blame on them, maybe not fair, I feel. Now, there are people coming in now hoping to take advantage of a DACA amnesty.
Well,
No, so there has to be, so a limit. So you had to have come here before you were before you were conscious. Like okay. I don't know what that age would be. Maybe
before the age of consent.
Maybe before the age of consent.
7 years old. It's 7 years old in the Catholic tradition. Okay.
Well,
you don't have a relation until you're 7.
All right. Many of these people are Catholics. I don't know, but anyway, that's something for people to negotiate and horse trade over and stuff like that. Okay. But certainly, I would say it was below 12. I would say, so you cannot be on welfare currently. Okay. If you're on welfare currently, sorry. We can't afford to keep you. We can't afford to keep you. Right, sure. For crying out loud, So, but there has to be some kind of discussion. But to say that all of them have to go back. But President Trump is giving a path to citizenship over 10 to 12 years. It's interesting that he sort of gives this. I guess if people can't go that path, then I guess they would have to return. So maybe he's looking. I'd have to study his proposal more when he announces it. Maybe there's a way that people will voluntarily decide to go back to their countries.
Maybe.
If they decide, hey, no, this is too much trouble. This is too much trouble. So we'll look at what the White House has to say on Monday. It's not out yet, and it may not come out on Monday because there is blowback from the base. But I feel that there has to be some acknowledgement of responsibility on the part of American society as a whole.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Tim. It is a touchy issue because it is so central. And just the point I made about the political situation, Clinton enforced it. Well, back to '86 was Reagan, the first amnesty program, apparently. But Clinton and the Democratic Party used this tremendously to expand the Democratic base. So just thinking of America's situation now, the seriousness of this, if it's not done right, open immigration favors Democrats. It favors socialism.
Yes.
But we have an opportunity now, as we did in the Reagan years, to really minimize and almost eliminate the Democratic Party. We could have a new two-party system with libertarians and neocons, for example. Or we could actually have something, a party closer to the head wing that Father had in mind. A party, in other words, we could expand the political expression, which we need to do, of what we're beginning here in Sanctuary. We want to try to express that beyond the level here as well, and that would benefit America tremendously if this is done right. Now Trump always wants to do things with heart, and he's a negotiator. He wants to get that wall built. I think I trust Trump's sensibilities on it. I don't think he's selling out the base. There was quite a reaction on David Knight yesterday against this, and Coulter, people like that, rightly so. I think we can trust that Trump is going to find a way that secures the borders and will humanely take care of those young people and those families who are here.
Well, when states were being, this whole idea of trying to figure out which party is it going to benefit. It goes back to when states were being admitted, even the Missouri Compromise of 1820, will allow Maine to come in as a slave state if Maine can come in as a free state. And even most recently, Alaska and Hawaii were admitted together because at the time it was assumed, I think, that Hawaii would be a Republican state and Alaska would be a Democratic state.
Not anymore.
It's actually reversed, but it's worked out in reverse. So always, and also Puerto Rico. The reason that Puerto Rico has such a hard time becoming a state is that Republicans say, "Oh no, we know where your vote's going to go." So let's just do something because it's right. Can we do that? Can we do something because it's right, not because it benefits one party or the other? They always say that politics is a team sport, but it'd be nice to do something just because it's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do the right thing.
We have these people who are in a tough position, and having I of course grew up overseas and of course legally, according to the law. But I can sort of imagine what it would be like, if my parents had not somehow I had not been born in Japan legally.
Illegal.
If I had been
an illegal alien,
if I had been an illegal alien, I can imagine that would be a very difficult situation.
Yeah.
And especially if I had grown up in that society and speaking the language of the society, and then one day saying, "Oh, okay, you have to go back to whatever country your parents brought you from." I can sympathize with these people because they came here, frankly, through and the people that I'm talking about, all right, not the people that are coming in yesterday or today, but the people that I'm talking about came to America through no fault of their own.
Okay.
They broke the law, yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, a 2-year-old. How can you say a 2-year-old is breaking the law? A 2-year-old. I mean, they were lucky enough to survive the trek from Mexico into Texas or Arizona or New Mexico, wherever it is they came in through. As I would say, just let's do something because it's right.
Okay, I agree with that, Tim.
Yeah. And it's true that many of these people, I think, will have to go back. Perhaps a majority will have to return. And hopefully their countries will benefit from their return eventually.
That's a tough one because
that's
you're talking them going back to Mexico or Ecuador.
Or El Salvador, for example. Extremely
Venezuela.
high crime.
You're going to send people back to Venezuela?
Well, from Venezuela, many Venezuelans are now going to Chile, and Chile is welcoming them.
Okay.
Chile says, "Yeah, we'd like to have them." Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So they can go to countries that welcome them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's good. I'd like to see that happen in Latin America.
Yeah. Okay, before we finish, I just want to follow up on a couple of stories that we've been reporting on. One is the redrawing of the congressional districts in the state of Pennsylvania.
Really?
Are you aware of this?
I had heard something about it, yeah.
Yeah, because there are...
There's 20 at the moment, right?
18, actually.
Is it going up?
Well, no. Actually, Pennsylvania's been going down.
Oh, really?
Pennsylvania used to be 20.
Oh, actually.
So every 10 years, the United States does a census, and then the 456 seats in the House of Representatives are reapportioned according to that census.
Okay.
So states that gain population get more seats, and states that lose population lose seats. And so Pennsylvania actually has been losing seats each time.
Population then?
They're losing relatively. Because the entire U.S. population is growing.
Okay.
All right. So if you stay still, if you don't have any change, you're actually losing.
I got you.
So anyway, Pennsylvania currently has 18 seats in the House of Representatives. And this is based on the previous census, which was done in 2010. Out of those 18 seats, 13 were occupied by Republicans, and then 5 by Democrats.
Okay.
Actually, now it's 12-5 because one of the Republicans resigned last October because of a sex scandal.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yes,
okay.
and there's going to be a special election for that seat in March.
Okay.
But anyway, that seat, that district also is a strongly Republican district, and so unless something happens, it looks like a Republican. I'm saying basically 13-5. Democrats say, wait a second. When we look at the total number of votes, the number of votes that Republicans receive, the number of votes that Democrats receive, there's not that much difference. It's almost 50-50.
Okay.
So how come we only have 5 out of 18 seats?
Okay. Talk about some gerrymandering here.
Gerrymandering, yes. That's exactly what they say. And so they took their case to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Now, in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the justices are not appointed; they are elected.
Oh, really?
Yes, they are elected on party tickets.
Okay.
And out of 7 justices, 5 were elected on Democratic tickets, all right, and 2 on Republican tickets.
Okay.
And so they took a look at this, the Democrats complaining, and the Supreme Court decided, the Democrats are right, all right, by a 5-2 decision.
I wonder why.
So anyway, they said the Democrats are right. So the Supreme Court said, okay, the legislature of Pennsylvania, which is a bicameral, 2 houses, right, has to come up with a new map.
Okay.
Because we have an election this year.
All right. Yeah.
Not just in November. We have a primary coming in May.
Very soon.
There are people running. And all of a sudden, it's like, wait a second. I don't know which district I'm in. I'm going to be in. Or even people donating, Or even, like Tom Marino is our congressman now.
Yeah.
May not be our congressman in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
So things are kind of in upheaval and confusion right now.
Okay.
So the Republicans now have taken the case to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Okay.
And so you say, hey, how can a state Supreme Court just throw out the redistricting map for a federal election. After all, this is about federal election, right? And so let's see. This happened, I think, in the last couple of days. They went to the U.S. Supreme Court. 2 presiding officers of the Pennsylvania General Assembly have filed an emergency application with the nation's top court Thursday for relief from a 11th-hour state court order to redraw the state's 18 congressional districts. State President pro tempore Joe Scanardi, a Republican of Jefferson County, and Speaker of the House Mike Turzai, Republican of Allegheny County, filed the motion. A sharply split Pennsylvania Supreme Court ordered the redraw on January 22 to be completed by the state officials by February 15th. I'm sorry, February 15th. So the date of the state's May primary election would not be affected. I don't know about that. I think it was February 9th. But anyway, they may be wrong. I'm not sure. The state court made its ruling in a suit brought by a set of Democratic voters arguing the existing map adopted in 2011 was the product of extreme partisan gerrymandering that violated the Pennsylvania Constitution. Now, it is true that the state assembly, the state legislature that drew up this map was controlled by Republicans in both houses. But that's what the Constitution of the state says, that the map is going to be done by the legislature of the time. So, of course, if Republicans are in charge, they're going to draw a map that's to their benefit. I mean, that's kind of assumed by the Constitution, right? And yet the Supreme Court has said, no, it's unconstitutional. That's the
Pennsylvania Supreme Court, you mean?
That's the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, yes.
Still pending in front of the U.S. Supreme Court?
An application has been filed. We don't have any word yet as to whether the U.S. Supreme Court will agree to take it up. But they don't have to.
That's true. They might not.
They're not required to do that. It's voluntary.
That's right. It's voluntary association. Free association.
All right. So that's one thing. So that's going on in Pennsylvania right now. To see. And by the way, Turzai, one of those people, is himself running for governor this year. But also, this is another recent story on the same issue that I just see. Let's see what this is. New Pennsylvania court order adds further definition to 11th-hour redistricting process. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court has retained a special advisor and asked for technical data in the event it needs to become more directly involved in creating Pennsylvania's next congressional district map. You see, they say that if the legislature doesn't do it in time, they say, we will do it.
Yeah, this is law by judicial fiat.
That's right. Yes. This is a problem.
Yes, with the Supreme Court.
The court issued an order on Friday naming Stanford University law professor Nathan Pursley to assist the court in adopting, if necessary, a remedial congressional redistricting plan.
I wonder what the split will be on that one. Then will it be 12-5 still?
Yeah. Pursley is an election law expert so the whole idea, though, is that because the Democrats want to impeach Trump, all right? That's the goal, impeach Trump. To impeach Trump, you have to have a majority in the House. All right? So this is one of the ways in which they're trying to get a majority in the House. Because by redistricting, I think they hope to gain about 3 or 4 seats in the House.
I see,
Yeah. Unless they go overboard and the other way. And it gets 13-5 the other way.
That'd be even better.
Pursley is an election law expert who has been retained by courts in several states to help draw new legislative district lines. So this is not just Pennsylvania. No. Other states also, courts wind up redrawing these lines. In its order, the court also tasked the General Assembly to submit by Wednesday its digital files that contain current boundaries of all Pennsylvania municipalities and voting precincts. But you see, because of the data that they have on us now, they know how we vote.
Yes.
They know how we vote, especially in Pennsylvania, because you have to register. Especially if you want to vote in the primaries, you have to register your party.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah. If you don't do that, then
I think it's true in Massachusetts also.
Oh yeah. In Virginia, no one registered their party. Where I used to live. But in Pennsylvania, so they know how each one of us, whether we vote, of course, whether we vote is of course public information because we go in there and we put down our, we check off our name there, and then they give us a ballot and we go in there and we vote. Whether we vote, of course, has always been public information.
Right.
But now, because of all the data, Facebook and so forth, Google, they collect all this information. And they know how we vote.
Right.
So when they do this redistricting, they're able to, and this is part of the gerrymandering process. They're able to draw the lines so that they group all Republicans into one place or something like that, and all the Democrats into one place or something like that. Like it doesn't exactly work that way, but they're able to do that.
You get very creative borderlines. Little tentacles everywhere.
Yeah. And some of the if you look at the Pennsylvania map, actually, I don't have the ability to show it to you here, but some of them are extremely creative.
Oh yeah, okay.
And the district has to be contiguous. You cannot just have one here and then another hole over there. It has to be contiguous.
Contiguous, yeah.
But when they say contiguous, sometimes they're actually just one property. Is between the lines.
Okay, really.
They really. This is what they do. This is what they get paid to do.
It seems to me to be kind of a weakness in the U.S. Constitution about the judicial branch. This is going to be an issue with John O'Gook. I remember when Dan Johnson was up here talking with the King, and it came to the issue of the King being the one appointed lifetime appointment. Well, obviously, you have the U.S. Supreme Court with 9. And then the discussion was really interesting because, and the King followed up on that, saying the King is basically the King is a judicial appointment. He's a judge.
Yes, that's right.
But this
not an appointment; it's inheritance.
It's an inheritance. But this particular in the John O'Gook Constitution, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 12-year terms for Supreme Court justices.
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
So they're elected.
Yes.
And here's the situation.
No, they're appointed and approved by Senate.
They're appointed and approved by the Senate.
But they have 12-year terms.
12-year, okay. So that seems to be more healthy. But this has been, I would say, maybe not a weakness, but it's been something that can be exploited, that's being exploited now, which gives too much power to the judicial branch. They're actually making law, and they've been doing it for a long time. And this is what these judges in Pennsylvania are proposing to do. They want to make law. And that's what they're getting ready to do. So somehow in John O'Gook, that whether that will be a controversy or whatever, it seems
like I said, government does not make society virtuous. So yeah, there will be these controversies. In John O'Gook, the thing is that after the U.S. Supreme Court, there would be a king above that, to whom the Republicans in Pennsylvania could go to and say, hey, this is unfair. And the king might say, hey, you got 13-5 when the actual voting population is half and half. Don't you think this is a little bit strange? The king might say that. Yeah.
How would it function with the king in this situation, for example?
Yeah, so
what would the king's power be, for example, in this situation?
Well, first of all, the king cannot rule on something that is not presented to him. The Constitution says that the king can receive appeals on cases after the Supreme Court has spoken. All right. So if in this case the Supreme Court chooses not to hear this case, it's not going to go to the king. If the Supreme Court says, "Hey, you guys take care of it." In Pennsylvania, we're too busy. We're not going to bother with this.
I got you.
Or that this is a state issue. We're not going to get involved in this. It never goes to the king.
So the king is like a federal level, then the top level.
Sure. Yeah. And it's only after the Supreme Court has ruled that one or both of the parties can then appeal to the king. And the king can then decide whether or not he's going to receive that appeal.
Now, if the king receives the appeal, what powers would he have? Could he just nullify the order?
He could.
Yeah. Could he just say this?
Yes.
So that is reserved. That is sort of an absolute power to the king.
Well,
judicial power.
Absolute power. I
mean, it's prerogative.
And absolute power is a pretty strong word. But does the Supreme Court today in the United States have absolute power? No. I mean, they don't have that either. Yeah. But always I think, what if you have a bad king? For one thing, if you have a bad king, we believe in spirit world, and we believe, and the king said in his preamble that kings that do not fulfill their duties will be have all manner of curses heaped upon them, or something to that effect.
Like that, yeah.
We do believe in the spirit world. We do believe that.
Sure.
So we have True Father now, and then kings down the line will have more and more of their ancestors there. The second king will be there. The third king will be there. The fourth king, and so forth. So
exactly,
all manner of curses will amount to a pretty big heap of curses, I think. Yeah. So
I would think it's been very difficult for a eternal good king to do anything wrong for too long.
Yes.
But then there's also the culture we're developing here that the second king particularly is doing with his personality, which is so accessible, and the training, the peace police, peace militia, how young people are going to be trained. There's going to be such a strong moral compass coming up from, like we said, the three kings flipping.
Flipping. We're excited. We're knocking the microphones around.
Up, down, down, up.
Yes.
Around.
But we're out of time.
Okay.
We're actually past time now, and we thank everyone for tuning in this morning. We look forward to the building of Cheonryuk, bit by bit, and President Trump is contributing to that, and he has spread that message to Europe, to Davos in Switzerland.
Yes.
Following on the second king of Cheonryuk, spreading the message of self-defense.
Yeah. King was in Switzerland.
Yes. Then Tuesday, President Trump will give his State of the Union address Tuesday evening. So we look forward to hearing what he says then, and we'll be reporting on that Wednesday on the King's Report. All right. Thank you all for tuning in, and may God bless you. God bless, Godspeed, and may His kingdom come.
Amen.